The Dragon's Choice. J.M. The Dragon's Choice. Written exclusively for Romance Audiobooks - Love. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved. Prologue. The wind loved him. Up here, far above the noise and stench and steel of the city, Ves Virilage stretched his wings and let the sky claim him. The late afternoon light sliced through layers of cloud and air, gilding the tips of his midnight scales in molten gold. His body was a blade. His blood sang. This was joy. This was the only time he remembered what it felt like to be alive. He didn't get much of that these days. Below, the world marched on. Construction cranes, most stamped with his insignia, stabbed the skyline. Traffic crawled like insects. His empire, a sprawl of towers, rare metals, and boardrooms, moved without him. He'd built it to be self-sufficient, ruthless, and unstoppable. Just like him. Ves tucked his wings, angled into a dive, and laughed. The sound vanished into the wind, but the rumble of it settled in his chest like thunder. He looped beneath a low bank of clouds, then flared again, catching the updraft.
"You were born for this,"
the dragon in him murmured, old and deep and always watching.
"Not the suits, not the numbers."
But the truth was, Ves had stopped listening to the dragon a long time ago. Not completely, never completely, but enough to keep the fire contained. Enough to pretend that the endless waiting didn't ache, because he was waiting. A century ago he might have called it fate, destiny, the ancient soul bond whispered in the oldest dragon songs. But now he just called it silence. He'd felt the tug once, years ago. Just a flicker. A brush of something that hummed and sparked like lightning under his skin. It vanished before he could trace it. Since then, nothing. He'd hunted for his mate in every city, every gala, every quarterly meeting and product launch, across continents, across plains. Gone, or never found, or, worse, already lost. In his 2 centuries of conquering, building, ruling, nothing had ever felt as hollow as this waiting. A part of him, a cold, tired part, was ready to stop hoping. Ves banked again, letting the curve of his body carry him toward the distant hills beyond the city. Nestled deep in the woods, the academy's slate rooftops and sprawling wings sprawled like a sleepy beast. Old magic clung to the stones that needed an upgrade, which was why he was commissioned by the Stonebrook family, the academy's biggest donors, to build a new wing and patch up a few others. Most CEOs he knew wouldn't get their hands dirty, and like them, he almost never stepped in personally on builds like this. That's what project leads and liaisons were for. But something about the grounds had called to him from the moment he had stepped foot on them to examine the site. A tremor beneath the earth, a whisper in old stone. He'd told himself it might be a hidden artifact, something ancient tucked away, perhaps drawn to the dragon in his blood. If he found something of value, he wouldn't keep it. He never did. The thrill was always in uncovering the thing no one else could see. That rarest glint of treasure, just before it was claimed. His wings flared once, catching the thermals. He slowed his descent, scanning the grounds. Yes, something stirred below. And whatever it was, he couldn't wait to discover it. Chapter 1. The Tour. Headmistress Buffer clung to his arm like a poisonous vine. Short, with wispy brown hair curled in girlish ringlets around her pinched, pixie-like features, She had the stature of a fairy godmother, but the eyes of a debt collector. Her face, lined like a road map, marked her as older than him by a century or two. Ves resisted the urge to shake her off. Barely.
This way, Mr. Virilage.
She chirped, guiding him toward the west corridor, with a smile so tight it looked carved in place.
I think you'll be very impressed with our junior development wing. We're incredibly proud of our hybrid enrichment program.
The hum in his throat could have passed for agreement. It had been that way since he touched down and shimmered into his human form that morning. Fawning voices that greeted him in the staff lounge. Whispered names, widened eyes, subtle scent shifts. Females, mostly Shifter and one blonde bombshell of a human, eyed him like he was the biggest bull at a county fair. It was always the same, and with human women, it was always worse. They looked at him like he was a rung on the ladder, wealth, status, legacy, all wrapped up in a 6'4" dragon-shaped gift box. He had no time, no interest, and definitely no patience. He'd lived through years, decades of attention. He'd survived duchesses, heiresses, socialites, reporters, and clingy social climbers who thought they could seduce their way into legend. Now, he barely noticed. Except when he did. Like today. Because Headmistress Buffer had insisted on giving him the grand tour herself. She latched onto him the second he'd arrived and hadn't stopped talking since. He didn't care about her programs or her academy-wide spell safety protocols. He didn't want to meet the staff, and he sure as hell didn't need to be paraded past the line of teachers peeking from doorways and pretending they weren't whispering about his, wingspan.
I know it's not in your official scope,
Buffer was saying, her voice falsely casual as they turned another corner.
but I would be thrilled if you'd consider a small talk at next month's fundraising dinner. Just 5 minutes. Nothing major.
No. His voice was flat. Final. She blinked, recovering quickly.
Perhaps just a brief.
No. She had the good sense to drop it, though her fingers squeezed tighter around his arm. He exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled, and scanned the hall. Whelps of all kinds, doors, shifters, classrooms, crumbling stone. He didn't want to be here. He'd rather be flying. Hell, even sitting in a boardroom while someone droned on and on about the benefits of installing anti-goblin security wards in corporate bathrooms. But he'd felt the pulse, the shiver, the same signal from last night, only stronger. Not magic exactly, not a threat, but something old, buried, familiar. And a dragon never ignored instinct. Which was why he'd stayed, and why he was tolerating this tour, even if it felt like being bled out by 1,000 paper cuts.
Here we have the first-year classrooms,
Buffer said, flinging open a door. And that's when he saw her. He zeroed in on the chaotic scene at first. Sparkles in the air, a shrieking griffin cub flapping its tiny wings, smoke curling from what an open storybook. And at the center of it all stood a human woman. She was covered in glitter. Colorful pages from the book fluttered to the floor. Her hair was a mess of dark curls and chalk dust, and one small, squirming creature was sitting at her feet, actively chewing on the fallen pages. She looked up, brown eyes wide, mouth parted, and froze. Ves did too. He didn't know why. She wasn't the kind of woman who turned heads in a crowd. She wasn't bold or flashy. She didn't pout or preen or simper. In fact, she looked like she wanted to be anywhere but seen. The opposite of her colleagues who had been nothing more than lust wrapped in polite small talk. She sneezed. Something in him pulled taut. Tension, ancient and immediate, curled like a sated cat in his spine. He wanted to wipe her nose, dust her off, hold her close. Her eyes locked with his for a single, breathless beat. Then she blinked and spoke.
Sorry.
She said, brushing a puff of smoke away from her face.
Mondays.
He arched a brow. That bad? He asked, voice dry. She looked down at the book, now on fire. She dropped it on the floor, and as she put out the flames with the sole of her brown leather flat, she muttered.
I've seen worse.
His mouth twitched, just slightly, almost a smile. Almost. Buffer cleared her throat loudly, breaking the moment like a snapped wire.
Miss Hayworth,
She said, gesturing stiffly to the griffin doing lazy loops toward the window with the self-satisfaction of a dog gnawing on a meaty bone.
kindly convince little Barry to shift back and return to your duties. His mother left clean clothes in his cubby just this morning.
Yes, headmistress.
Ves didn't look away. Neither did she. Until Buffer started talking again, pulling him down the hall with a surprisingly strong grip. Something about lesson plans and runic alignment. All noise without substance. He didn't hear a word. His thoughts were on the woman. The human woman. The glitter. The smoke. Those deep brown eyes. A quiet pull that had started in his chest radiated outward, making his warm olive-toned skin even warmer. And for the first time, a question he'd never asked before surfaced in his mind. Who was she? Chapter 2. Sparkles and Gossip. Tara Hayworth was still finding glitter in places glitter had no business being. She'd scrubbed her arms, dabbed her cheeks with wet paper towels, and even attacked her dark curls with a brand new brush she found in the lost and found bin. No luck. Barry's Griffin glitter had claimed her for its own. Lank Tenham, her boss and the full-time teacher of the first-year class, peered at her over his spectacles. They were cracked at the bridge, again, and held together with a charm that pulsed faintly whenever he sneezed.
You handled that fairly well,
He said, tapping ash off the end of his self-lighting wand.
Better than I would have. Last time Barry shifted unexpectedly, he set my desk on fire.
Tara raised a brow.
You're the one who fed him fire chips for a snack.
He grinned sheepishly.
He looked peckish.
Tara shook her head with a reluctant smile and started sweeping up the shimmering dust from the floor. Her thoughts, however, were not on the little griffin's mishaps. They were still on him. Ves Virilage. He looked at her as if she were a splatter of paint on an empty canvas, an annoyance he couldn't quite decide was worthless or a treasure. He hadn't said much. Just one sardonic line and a twitch of a smile. And somehow, that had been enough to burn itself into her brain. Which was stupid. Utterly, hopelessly stupid. He was a dragon. And not just any dragon, the only known dragon in the realm. The haughty billionaire, teacher-avoiding, ice-veined type who probably wouldn't remember her name if it was tattooed across a chest full of gold. Supernaturals like that didn't just exist in a different world. They were a different world. And Tara had learned a long time ago, on a cold park bench at the age of 5, that no one held any value for abandoned things. Ves, Mr. Virilage, had only stared at her because she was covered in glitter. Dragons liked sparkly things after all. She was a momentary distraction, nothing more.
Lunch in the staff room?
Kimber Wheatley popped her head into the classroom, and it was like the sun had decided to walk indoors. With blonde curls bouncing, lipstick a flawless slash of cherry red, and all the right curves, Kimber wore confidence like a second skin. Men didn't just gravitate toward Kimber, they orbited her. Tara, who often felt like a smudged pencil drawing, felt especially colorless next to her friend's vibrant oil painting. Tara nodded, dusted off her skirt one last hopeless time, and followed Kimber's clicking high heels down the hall. She was also the only other human on the academy's staff, a lonely club of two that bonded them in a way none of the shifters or witches could understand. As soon as they pushed through the door, his name seemed to hit Tara from all directions.
Tall as the ceiling, I swear.
One teacher whispered near the coffee machine that sputtered thick sludge 1 out of every 4 cups. Clutching her sandwich like a shield, Tara made a beeline for her usual corner table and sank into the chair that was tucked away from the main flow of traffic. The tense knot in her shoulders loosened just a fraction. She was out of the line of fire. If she kept quiet, she could almost pretend to be invisible. As usual. From her vantage point, she watched the other teachers huddled together. Their eyes were bright, their faces flushed, and their gestures animated. They reminded Tara of a flock of excited crows at a bake sale, all chattering at once over which prize was the most decadent.
Those eyes. Did you see those golden eyes?
One asked, her words a breathless sigh.
Mesmerizing, were they not?
Chimed Buffer's assistant, leaning forward conspiratorially.
Do you know he paid off the Bloodstone Orphanage's entire debt last year? Just, wrote a check?
Someone else let out a low whistle.
What I wouldn't give for just one night.
Their excitement was a tangible thing, a shimmering energy that buzzed just beyond her reach. It was a club she didn't have the password for, a language she couldn't speak. She took a small, tasteless bite of her sandwich and simply watched.
And single,
the witchy-looking math teacher added, staring off into the distance as if picturing him by her side.
No way, he doesn't have a mate?
Someone asked, the question dropping into the chatter with an almost reverent hush. Before anyone could answer, the murmuring was cut short by a ripple of bright laughter. Kimber stood framed in the doorway from the adjoining restroom, one hand on her hip, a dazzling smile playing on her lips as she surveyed the room.
Nope, but I am definitely applying for the position.
More laughter erupted, and Kimber gave them a theatrical wink. She sauntered over to the coffee machine, poured 1 mug, made Tara's milky tea, then navigated the tables with a focused grace that made Tara's stomach tighten. Here it comes, Tara thought, bracing herself as her friend approached. Kimber set a mug down in front of her, the ceramic clicking softly on the table. She didn't even sit before she leaned in, her expression a perfect blend of mischief and demand.
Okay, tell me everything. Buffer said that he smirked at you?
Tara quickly recounted the awkward, glitter-splattered moment, deliberately leaving out the part where her cheeks had caught fire under his gaze.
Well, you made an impression,
Kimber insisted. Tara snorted.
A bad one.
Girl, Ves Virilage gives out smiles, grins, smirks, whatever you want to call them, like they're gold bullion. That was practically a love letter coming from a dragon.
Tara bit into her sandwich instead of replying, then let out a strangled cough. Glitter. She scraped her tongue, and a tiny, sparkling fleck ended up on the tip of her finger.
I heard, from a nameless source, that he looked interested,
Kimber went on, one eyebrow arched in a perfect, playful line. Tara rolled her eyes.
Only because I was shiny.
She put her sandwich down and lifted her mug of tea.
Besides, even if he were interested, which he definitely was not, you know how I feel about dating. I don't have the time or the energy.
You have time to watch those old black and white movies,
Kimber countered.
You just don't make time for anything that might lead to happiness.
I'm making time for my degree,
Tara corrected, the familiar mantra always on a loop in the back of her mind. Her own personal countdown toward freedom.
8 more months. That's it. 8 months and I'll be a teacher, with my own classroom. Stability. Finally. For the first time in my life.
Before Kimber could say something else, the staff room door creaked open. Coach Fangor poked his head in, a hulking rhino shifter with a permanent whistle around his neck and a suspiciously chewed-up clipboard.
Hey, Hayworth. You're up for recess duty. Coach Clobber called out. Something about a pickup game and an argument with a troll.
Tara groaned.
Of course.
It was the unofficial tax for being the token human assistant. She was the lowest rung on the supernatural ladder, which meant all the truly fun jobs, lunchroom mop duty, restocking the bathrooms, and now recess, were hers.
That bites,
Kimber said, wrinkling her nose. Tara pulled on her coat. She felt the familiar hole in the pocket with her fingers, but the worn fabric was still warm.
Tell me about it.
The playground was alive with shrieks, half-baked spells, and small contained explosions. Tara crouched beside a little witch and warlock mid-argument, one with twitching ears and the other whose hair stood on end from a misfired static charm. She smoothed the conflict with a soothing voice that did wonders to de-escalate the situation.
Use your words.
She said gently.
Not your spells.
She stood as the two shook hands, looked at each other, then ran off laughing. A flicker of motion to her right made her turn, and a vast shadow swept over the ground, stealing the sun for a second before it vanished. Ves. Wings flared, rising into the sky, his midnight form slicing through the air with breathtaking power and grace. He was leaving, but for one heartbeat, just one. As he banked against the wind, his silhouette turned. It felt like he was looking back, right at her. Tara blinked, and he was gone, a speck disappearing into a fluffy white cloud. The sky felt hollow without him in it, a vast, lonely space. She shook her head, her heart as vacant as the sky.
No,
she muttered, the sound lost to the wind and the shrieks of playing children.
He definitely wasn't looking at you.
Her traitorous pulse, a frantic drum against her ribs, told a different story. Chapter 3. The Hunt. The ascent was a release. One powerful downstroke of his wings and the academy, the whispers, the cloying scent of Headmistress Buffer's perfume, it all fell away. The air thinned, turning crisp and cold, a soothing relief against the strange heat that had settled under his skin. He circled once, twice, a predator surveying his new territory. His gaze wasn't on the sprawling grounds or the ancient woods. It was fixed on the playground. On her, Tara Hayworth. Even from this height, he could see the gentle way she crouched to speak to a pair of squabbling whelps, her dark curls catching the afternoon sun. There was no artifice in her posture, no performance. Just a quiet competence that was as out of place in the academy of preening magical beings as a wildflower in a curated garden. The dragon in his blood, a creature of instinct and fire, rumbled with a deep, possessive hum. His logical mind, the one that built empires and negotiated treaties, scoffed. She's human. A clumsy, glitter-covered human who looks like she's one bad day away from hiding in a supply closet. But the pull he'd felt in that classroom hadn't faded. If anything, it had sharpened. It was the same tremor he'd felt from the grounds, but now it had a face, a name. Who was she? The question echoed in the hollow space in his chest, the same space where loneliness had lived forever. He had asked himself about artifacts, about business rivals, about ancient magics. He had never not once, been curious about a human woman. From behind a cloud, he watched until she herded the last of the whelps inside, a purpose in her shoulders. Only then did he bank sharply, turning his back on the academy and rocketing toward the city. The flight home did nothing to clear his head. Usually, the sky was his sanctuary. Now, it was just the empty space between where he'd been and where he was going. Her face was imprinted on the back of his eyelids, the wide, startled brown eyes, the dusting of glitter on her cheek, the way her mouth had formed the word Mondays, as if it were a complete and understandable explanation for a world on fire. He landed on the private rooftop of his penthouse, the transformation from dragon to man seamless, a shimmer of midnight scales dissolving into olive skin and the sharp lines of a bespoke suit. The city sprawled below him, a galaxy of lights he owned a significant portion of. It had never felt so quiet. He stalked inside. His shoes were toed off, his socks peeled away before the door had even clicked shut. The cool marble floor met his bare feet as he moved with singular purpose, ignoring the floor-to-ceiling windows and the priceless art. The entire sterile perfection of the home, built for one, was nothing but an obstacle between him and his desk. He reached it, picked up the secure line, and dialed a single number. It was answered on the first ring.
Yes, Mr. Virilage?
Leroy's voice was clipped, efficient, and utterly devoid of curiosity. I have a name, Ves said. Tara Hayworth. She's a teacher's aide at the New Havens Academy for the Ascended.
Understood.
I want to know everything, Ves commanded. Her history, her family, her location, her fears. I want to know why a human woman is working in an academy for children who will outlive her by centuries. He paused, the image of her putting out the book fire with her shoe flashing in his mind. And I want to know what she's made of. There was a beat of silence.
Consider it done, sir. You'll have the preliminary report by morning.
The line went dead. Ves stood there for a long moment, staring out at the glittering, indifferent city. The hunt had begun, and for the first time in a very long time, the prize wasn't treasure or power. It was a woman covered in glitter, and he was going to find out why she shone brighter than anything else in his world. Chapter 4. The Grind and the Gaze. The lock on Tara's apartment door clicked shut behind her, the broken sound echoing what she felt in her bones. It was late, the kind of late where the moon seemed tired and the city had finally hushed. She dropped her keys into a small ceramic bowl by the door, the clatter unnaturally loud in the silence. Her body ached, a deep-seated weariness from a day spent chasing down shifters, mediating magical disputes, and standing on her feet for 8 straight hours. And yet, she wouldn't have traded it. In the classroom, with the little ones, there was no judgment, no calculating angles. She could just be Tara, and they loved her for it without reservation. A pure, uncomplicated affection she'd been seeking her entire life. Nothing she could expect from golden eyes, a sardonic smile, and the vast shadow of wings against a blue sky. She peeled off her coat and caught a glimpse of herself in the small hallway mirror. Her curls were a mess, her cheeks were flushed, and a single, defiant fleck of glitter winked at her from her eyebrow.
A momentary distraction, nothing more,
She reminded herself, the thought a familiar, bitter tonic. Shaking her head, she moved to the small table that served as her desk, dining room, and life planning station. Textbooks on magical pedagogy were stacked high, their spines uncracked and waiting.
8 more months.
The mantra helped her summon the effort to sink into the chair and force herself to open a book on elemental theory. Soon, the words blurred into meaningless shapes as her thoughts once more turned to Ves. Her phone, lying face down on the table, began to buzz. The vibration was a violent intrusion, rattling against the wood and scraping away the peace of the evening. She flinched, staring at it as it lit up with a name that made a sour knot of dread form in her stomach. Garstonebrook. A werewolf with an ego as big as the moon, he answered to. He was the Academy's newest benefactor. Or rather, his sharp-tongued wife, Faye, was. It was her family's immense fortune funding the entire new wing, a fact that gave Gar the mistaken impression he'd also bought the right to harass its staff. The only good thing to come out of that union was their son, Lars, a delightful boy she tutored on Wednesdays. Tara sensed the chill of his father's disappointment in him, but she also knew his mother would burn the world down for her child. Unfortunate that the weekly tutoring session was Gar's official excuse for having her number, an excuse he stretched to its absolute limit. She watched the phone buzz once, twice, 3 times.
Just let it go to voicemail,
she prayed. Yet, she knew better. Ignoring Gar only made him more persistent, his entitlement growing with every unanswered call. With a sigh that felt scraped from the bottom of her soul, she picked up the phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. Steeling herself, she answered.
Hello?
Her voice was clipped, professional, leaving no room for pleasantries.
Tara! I was hoping I'd catch you.
Gar's voice was exactly how he behaved, overly familiar and greasy slick, with an insincerity that felt like oil on water.
Just wanted to get an educational update on my pup. See how he's settling in.
Lars is doing fine. He's a bright student,
she said, her eyes drifting to the stack of unpaid bills on the corner of her table. The Stonebrooks paid generously for the tutoring, and her salary from the academy was more than fair, but even combined, the income had barely made a dent in the mountain of her foster mother's medical expenses.
Good, good. Glad to hear it.
A slight pause.
You know, I was thinking, all this talk over the phone is so impersonal. You and I could get a real drink, discuss his progress somewhere. Private.
The word hung in the air, weighted and ugly. Tara's mind raced, scrambling for an excuse.
I have to study. I'm coming down with dragon pox. My apartment is on fire.
Before she could land on a believable lie, a woman's voice cut through the background on his end, sharp and laced with irritation.
Gar, who are you talking to at this hour?
The familiar, steady sound of Faye Stonebrook's voice cut through the panic. A wave of pure relief washed over Tara, so potent her shoulders slumped. Faye had unknowingly thrown her a lifeline, and she grabbed on with everything she had.
Sounds like you're busy, Mr. Stonebrook,
she said, cutting him off before he could protest.
We can talk about Lars during academy hours. Good night.
Her thumb stabbed the red-end call icon on the screen with satisfying force. The silence that rushed back in wasn't empty. It was a sanctuary. She leaned her head back, closing her eyes and savoring the feeling of being utterly, blessedly alone. The gross, cloying feeling of Gar's call began to recede, replaced once again by the day's more profound mystery. A dragon who had looked at her, just for a second, as if she were something more than a glitter-covered human on a playground. Chapter 5. The Report. The sun had barely crested the horizon, painting the tops of the lesser skyscrapers in hues of orange and rose, but Ves was already awake. He hadn't slept. Sleep was a state of vulnerability he rarely allowed himself, and last night, his mind had been too full of glitter and wide brown eyes to even attempt it. He stood on his balcony, a mug of black coffee steaming in his hand, the cool morning air doing nothing to calm the restless energy coiling in his gut. The city below, was his kingdom, a complex machine of his own design, yet his focus was miles away, fixed on an old academy with slate rooftops. A soft chime from his desk terminal echoed from his living room. His head turned, a predator's stillness settling over him. The report had arrived. He set the mug down on a table and moved inside, the sterile perfection of his home feeling more like a cage than ever. The file was waiting for him on the screen, a single, unassuming icon labeled Hayworth T. He sat, the leather of his chair groaning in the silence, and opened it. The information was concise, clinical, and utterly comprehensive. Name: Tara Hayworth. Age: 26 species, human, non-magical status, orphan. Abandoned by parents on a park bench. Entered foster care system at age 5. Raised by a single foster mother, Emma Vance, until her passing at age 68. Residence: Apartment 4, B, 1823, Finch Street, West District. Occupation: Teacher's aide, New Haven's Academy for the Ascended. Education: Currently enrolled in online master's degree program for early shifter education. Expected graduation, 8 months. Ves's eyes narrowed on the word orphan, abandoned. The word resonated with the hollow space in his own chest, a different kind of abandonment, but a familiar ache nonetheless. He read on, his jaw tightening. Financials: Academy salary is standard, supplemented by private tutoring fees from the Stonebrook family. Significant outstanding debt is noted. Medical bills from foster mother Emma Vance's terminal illness. Current income is insufficient to make substantial progress against the principal amount. So, that was the weight he'd seen in her shoulders. Not just the weariness of the day, but the crushing burden of a debt she carried for someone she loved. A fierce, protective surge, so primal it was almost painful, shot through him. The dragon in his blood recognized her loyalty as a treasure more valuable than gold. She didn't run from the burden. She carried it. His gaze flickered to the next section. Known associates. Primary social contact is Kimber Wheatley, human colleague. No significant romantic history. No criminal record. Clean. Then he saw the final addendum, a log of recent communications flagged by his security analyst. Note: Subject receives frequent, unsolicited calls from one Gar Stonebrook, werewolf, beta in the Golden Dawn pack. Calls are often late evening, and conversations initiated by the subject are consistently brief. Analysis suggests harassment. The name hit him like a physical blow. Stonebrook, the same family whose donation was funding his work at the academy. A deep growl rumbled in Ves's chest, a sound that wasn't human. A lesser predator, a common wolf, was circling his. He stopped the thought, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of his desk. His. The possessiveness of the word was absolute, an instinct that bypassed all logic. He now understood. She was a woman trapped by debt, by duty, and by the unwanted attentions of a pathetic cur. She was hiding in plain sight, trying to build a small, stable life for herself against overwhelming odds. His first instinct was to erase her problems. A single wire transfer could clear the debt. A single call could end Stonebrook's status, his reputation, and his delusions of grandeur. But he knew, with a certainty that surprised him, that she would hate it. She was proud. He'd seen it in the way she'd stood unbroken during the pandemonium of her classroom. A handout would be just another cage. Number. If he was going to get close to her, it couldn't be as a billionaire descending from on high. It had to be on her terms. In her world. He stood and walked back to the balcony, his mind a whirlwind of strategy. The construction project. It was the perfect excuse. Most CEOs would delegate. but his personal involvement would now seem diligent, thorough. It would give him a reason to be on campus, to walk the halls, to observe, to be near her. He picked up his scry phone, his thumb scrolling past his usual contacts until he found the number he needed. Headmistress Buffer answered on the first ring, her voice a flutter of surprise and sycophantic pleasure.
Mr. Virilage, to what do I owe the honor this early in the morning?
I've been reviewing the preliminary structural reports for the new wing, Ves said, his voice a smooth, cold blade of command. I've found several discrepancies that require my personal oversight. I'll be on site for the foreseeable future. There was a sputtering on the other end.
Of course. Absolutely, Mr. Virilage. We are honored to have your expertise.
I'll require a temporary office, he continued, his eyes scanning the distant horizon, picturing a playground. Something quiet, with a view of the west corridor, a view of her classroom.
Consider it done,
Buffer chirped. I'll be there in an hour, he said, and ended the call. Chapter 6. The Invasion. The morning were gulps of lukewarm tea, a frantic search for matching socks, and the quiet hum of anxiety that had become Tara's baseline. She'd tossed and turned all night, her dreams a chaotic mix of Gar Stonebrook's oily voice, her foster mother's mounting bills, and a pair of molten gold eyes watching her from the sky. She arrived at the academy expecting the usual Tuesday morning turmoil. A few lingering parents, Coach Fangor bellowing about proper warm-up stretches, and the scent of Lank's self-lighting wand charring something in the classroom. Instead, she walked into a buzz of energy so thick it was almost visible. Teachers weren't in their classrooms. They were clustered in the main hall, whispering with an electric fervor that made the hairs on Tara's arms stand up. Before she could even ask what was happening, Kimber intercepted her, grabbing her by the elbow with a strong grip for someone so feminine. Her friend's eyes were wide, her cherry-red lipstick somehow looking even brighter today.
You are not going to believe this,
Kimber breathed, pulling Tara toward a less crowded corner.
Let me guess.
Tara said dryly.
Barry shifted again, and this time he laid a golden egg.
Better,
Kimber whispered, leaning in conspiratorially.
He's back. And he's not just visiting.
Tara's stomach did a slow, nervous flip. She didn't have to ask who he was.
What are you talking about?
Ves Virilage. He called Buffer this morning. Said he found structural discrepancies and needs to personally oversee the project for the foreseeable future. They're setting up a temporary office for him right now.
Tara stared at her friend, waiting for the punchline. When it didn't come, a cold dread began to seep into her bones.
You're kidding. Why would a billionaire CEO play foreman on a simple academy renovation?
Who cares why?
Kimber squealed, her excitement practically vibrating off her.
The point is, the dragon is nesting. Here, for weeks.
Tara felt a wave of dizziness. This had to be a mistake. A man like that didn't just decide to hang around an academy full of young ones and their ceaseless energy. Her mind flashed back to his gaze on the playground, the feeling of being seen, and she pushed it away violently. It was a coincidence. It had to be.
Speaking of predators,
Tara muttered, changing the subject to something that felt, ironically, safer.
Gar Stonebrook called me last night.
Kimber's face instantly soured.
Ugh, don't tell me. Private drink to discuss Lars's progress?
The very same,
Tara confirmed with a grimace.
Luckily, Faye interrupted.
You have to be careful with him, T, Kimber said, her voice serious. It's not just that he's a rich jerk. You know he's the beta of the Golden Dawn pack, right? That kind of power gives a guy a dangerous sense of entitlement. He's not used to being told no.
The information settled like a stone in Tara's gut. She'd known he was important, but beta of a major pack meant he had authority, influence, and a pack of loyal wolves to back him up. Her position felt even more precarious.
I'll be fine.
She said, more to convince herself than Kimber.
I just need to keep my head down and get through the next 8 months.
She sighed, ignoring the queasy roll of her stomach. Her mantra felt a bit flimsy today. She said goodbye to Kimber and headed toward her classroom, her footsteps heavy. As she rounded the corner into the west corridor, she stopped dead. Her quiet hallway was no longer quiet. 2 men in crisp professional uniforms were carrying a sleek, modern desk into the empty office directly across from her classroom door. The very same office that had been used for storing forgotten spellcasting dummies and broken potion beakers for the last year. And standing in the doorway, directing them with a quiet, indisputable authority, was Ves Virilage. He was dressed in a dark gray suit that probably cost more than her entire education. He wasn't looking at the movers. He was looking directly at her, as if he'd been waiting for her to appear. The intensity in his golden eyes was a physical force, pinning her to the spot. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was no coincidence. He took a slow step out into the hall, his presence seeming to suck all the air out of the corridor. "Miss Hayworth," he said. His voice was a seductive rumble that vibrated right through her. He knew her name. Of course he knew her name. Buffer had probably supplied it, but hearing it from him felt different, significant.
Mr. Virilage,
She managed, her voice barely a whisper. He glanced from her face to her classroom door, a flicker of something unreadable in his expression. "I trust the glitter situation has been fully resolved?" The call back to their first meeting was so unexpected it jolted her. He remembered the fire, the smoke, and the glitter. A hot blush crept up her neck.
Yes. Mostly.
Good. His gaze lingered on her for a beat too long before he gestured vaguely toward the office behind him. "I'll be working from here for the next few weeks." Structural oversight. It was a statement, not a request, an announcement of his invasion into her small, carefully managed world.
Okay,
She squeaked out, feeling like a mouse staring up at a hawk. "My team and I will endeavor not to disrupt your classes, but let me know if I do." His voice went an octave lower, rolling through her like thunder on a summer's day. "And if you require anything at all." With a final, lingering look that felt like it was cataloging every thought in her head, he turned his back and re-entered his new office. Tara practically fled into her classroom, shutting the door behind her and leaning against the solid wood, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. She pressed her forehead against the cool surface, trying to calm her frantic pulse. Her sanctuary was no longer safe. Her quiet corner of the world now had a dragon living across the hall. A dragon who knew her name, remembered she'd been covered in glitter, and had, for some terrifying and inexplicable reason, decided to move in. And the most terrifying part of all, a small, treacherous part of her was ridiculously, impossibly thrilled. Chapter 7. The Observation. The office was something he never had to get used to before. It was small, smelled faintly of dust and forgotten cleaning spells, and the single window looked out onto a brick wall. Ves had built boardrooms that could host 100 different supernaturals, with views that stretched across the entire city. This was a closet, and it was perfect. Its true value wasn't the window to the outside, but the door that opened onto the west corridor. He left it slightly ajar, a strategic crack that gave him a clear, uninterrupted view of the door directly opposite, Tara Hayworth's classroom. He sat at the sleek, minimalist desk his team had installed, a scry tablet displaying complex architectural blueprints in front of him. To any casual observer, he was the diligent CEO, personally invested in his latest project. In reality, the blueprints were a prop. His entire focus was on the sliver of hallway and the muffled sounds of her world. He heard her voice, a sweet and patient murmur, punctuated by the occasional shriek of a whelp or a small percussive thump. Through the small, square window in her classroom door, he caught glimpses of her. He saw her crouch down to tie a tiny shoe, her dark curls falling forward. He saw her break up a squabble over a shared toy with a gentle hand on each shoulder. He saw her laugh, a genuine, unforced sound, when a little pixie accidentally turned a classmate's hair blue. The dragon in him, usually so restless and demanding, grew quiet. It watched, fascinated. This was a different kind of strength than he was used to. It wasn't the strength of a warrior or a CEO. It was the quiet, calm strength of a caregiver, a protector. The morning passed in this silent observation. He took a few calls, his tone a commanding monotone as he dismantled a rival's project bid and approved a $1 billion resource deal, all while his eyes remained fixed on her door. Around midday, the bell shrieked for lunch. The corridor erupted in a flood of small bodies. Tara emerged last, shepherding the final stragglers. She looked tired, the deep-seated weariness he'd noted before already settling into her shoulders. He was about to step out, to manufacture a reason to speak with her, when a scent hit him. Wet dog and arrogance. Ves's head snapped up, his eyes narrowing. Gar Stonebrook swaggered down the hall, his movements radiating an unearned confidence. He intercepted Tara just as she was about to turn toward the staff room.
Tara,
he said, his voice oozing a familiarity that made Ves's teeth ache.
Fancy seeing you here.
Tara's posture stiffened instantly.
Mr. Stonebrook, you caught me on my way to lunch.
It was a clear dismissal. Stonebrook didn't take the hint. He stepped closer, invading her space, and placed a hand on her arm.
Come on, Tara. Just one drink. We can talk about Lars. Don't be so difficult.
From his office, Ves went utterly still. The air in the small room seemed to crystallize, growing cold and sharp. A harsh growl vibrated in his chest, a primal sound of possessive fury. The dragon roared, demanding he tear the wolf apart for daring to touch what was his. He gripped the edge of his desk, the metal groaning under the pressure as he forced the instinct down. Not like this, he commanded himself. You will not frighten her. He rose from his chair, his movements silent and deliberate. He smoothed his suit jacket and stepped out into the hallway. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Stonebrook. The name was a shard of ice. Gar froze, his hand dropping from Tara's arm as if it had been burned. He turned, his bravado faltering as he met Ves's cold, golden gaze. Tara looked between the two of them, her eyes wide with shock and confusion.
Virilage,
Gar stammered, attempting to recover.
Just having a word with my son's tutor.
Ves took a step forward, his height and presence dominating the narrow corridor. He completely ignored Gar's explanation, his eyes fixed on the wolf. The board is under the impression your family's contribution was to the educational wing, Ves said, his voice dangerously soft. Not for loitering in the corridors and harassing the staff. The air in the alcove was thick with Ves's silent, predatory rage. Gar froze, his face a mask of shock that quickly curdled into fury.
This is a private matter, Virilage,
Gar snarled, trying to reclaim some semblance of authority. It was, Ves said, his voice dangerously calm as he took another slow, deliberate step forward. But your privacy ends where my patience does.
You have no right.
Gar shot back, his face flushing a dark mottled red. He puffed out his chest, falling back on his status.
My family's gold is funding this new build of yours. You will show me the proper respect.
Ves cut him off with a laugh. It was not a sound of humor, but of pure, chilling condescension. Your family's gold? You mean your mate's, correct? A sharp intake of breath came from the end of the alcove. Faye stood there, her face pale. Gar's own face went from red to ashen. He was exposed.
I am the beta of a pack.
He growled, his voice losing its conviction.
And you are dressing me down like a schoolboy.
Then you should stop behaving like one, Ves countered, his voice dropping to a glacial whisper. You seem to be confused about the order of things, so let's make it clear. You are a wolf, a predator, yes, but there is a food chain. Ves took one more step, closing the distance. The sheer pressure radiating from him made the beta wolf seem small, insignificant. You are a link in that chain, Ves continued, his eyes boring into Gar's. I am at the top. There is no challenge you can make. There is no fight you could win. To me, your status as beta means nothing. Do you understand? Gar's jaw worked. A deep growl caught in his throat, his pride warring with the primal instinct screaming at him to submit.
He understands, Mr. Virilage,
Faye said, her voice shaking but firm as she stepped forward and grabbed her husband's arm.
We are leaving now.
She pulled at Gar, her voice a desperate hiss in his ear.
Stop it, Gar. This isn't a fight you can win. He's a dragon.
Gar flinched at the word, the last of his bluster dissipating, leaving only the stark raw terror of a lesser predator facing its apex. Ves watched, his expression unreadable, as Faye dragged her defeated husband away. The hallway fell into a charged silence. Tara stood frozen, staring at the spot where Gar had been, her arms wrapped around herself. Ves's gaze softened as he turned to her. The cold fury he directed at the wolf vanished, replaced by a quiet concern that felt foreign and yet perfectly natural. Are you all right, Miss Hayworth? He asked, his voice a soft rumble. She looked up at him, her brown eyes a swirling mix of fear, relief, and utter bewilderment.
Yes, thank you.
I'm sorry you had to endure that, Ves stated. He was itching to go after Gar, but that would make him a monster in her eyes. Tara just nodded, unable to form words. She was looking at him as if seeing him for the first time, not as a mythical creature, but as a protector. And Ves knew, as he met her wide, questioning gaze, that he had just taken the first real step into her world. He had shown her a glimpse of the dragon, and she hadn't run. Chapter 8, The Aftermath. The silence that followed from Gar's hasty retreat pressed in on Tara from all sides, as well as the overwhelming presence of the man in front of her. Ves Virilage hadn't just spoken to a bully. He had wielded power like a physical weapon, and she had been standing in the epicenter of the blast. Are you all right, Miss Hayworth? He asked again, his voice softer now, the ice in it melted away. She could only nod, her throat tight. Words felt flimsy, inadequate.
Yes, thank you,
she finally whispered, the phrase sounding ridiculously small. She felt a desperate need to shrink, to disappear, but his golden gaze held her fast. He was looking at her with an intensity that had nothing to do with structural reports or academy renovations. It was personal. He won't bother you again, he stated, the finality in his tone sending a shiver down her spine. It was the calm certainty of a predator who had just marked his territory. Tara's mind spun. Why? Why would a man who commanded empires care about a werewolf harassing a teacher's aide? The disparity was too vast to comprehend. It made no sense. Unless
He was protecting his investment.
a cynical part of her brain supplied.
A disruption in the hall is bad for business.
It was a logical, safe explanation, and she clung to it like a life raft.
I have to get to lunch.
She stammered, needing to escape the suffocating intimacy of the moment. She didn't wait for a reply. She turned and practically fled down the hall, not daring to look back. When she pushed through the door to the staff room, she must have looked as rattled as she felt. Kimber, who was mid-bite into a salad, took one look at her and put her fork down.
Whoa. You look like you just saw a dragon.
Kimber's attempt at a joke was eerily close to the truth. Tara sank into the chair opposite her friend, her hands trembling slightly as she unwrapped her sandwich.
Something like that.
She recounted the entire incident in a rushed whisper. Gar's advance, the hand on her arm, and then Ves's sudden and welcomed intervention. Kimber's eyes grew wider with every word. When Tara finished, her friend was silent for a moment, a slow, dazzling smile spreading across her face.
Biscuits and gravy, sugar.
Kimber breathed, her voice full of awe.
The dragon just defended your honor.
No, he didn't.
Tara said quickly, shaking her head.
He was just asserting his authority. He doesn't like disruptions on his project site. That's all it was.
Tara, are you listening to yourself?
Kimber leaned forward, her voice dropping.
Gar Stonebrook is the beta of a major pack. People don't just talk to him like that. And Ves didn't tell him to stop disrupting the academy. He told him to stop harassing the staff. He did it for you.
You don't know that.
Tara argued weakly, but her own reasoning felt thin and brittle.
I know that a man who can buy and sell this entire city doesn't step in like that unless he's got a personal stake in the game.
Kimber insisted.
He's interested. I told you he was interested.
Tara took a bite of her sandwich. It tasted like sawdust. She couldn't reconcile Kimber's romantic theory with her own lifelong experience. People like Ves Virilage didn't see people like her. She was a background character, a smudge on the glass. To believe anything else was to set herself up for a fall she couldn't afford. The rest of the day was a lesson in exquisite torture. Every time she glanced at her classroom door, she was hyper-aware of the office across the hall. The door remained ajar, a dark sliver of observation. She felt watched, not in a creepy, invasive way, but with a focused attention that made her skin tingle. She tried to lose herself in her work, in reading stories, cleaning up spilled potions, and mediating a fierce debate about whether unicorns or pegasi were better. But part of her mind was constantly tethered to the corridor. When the final bell rang, the ensuing quiet of the empty classroom felt different. It wasn't peaceful. No, it was electric. She packed her bag slowly, her movements hesitant. She had to walk past his office to leave. Stepping into the hallway, she kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, her heart thumping a nervous rhythm against her ribs.
Don't look. Just keep walking.
As she drew level with his door, her traitorous eyes flickered to the side. Through the glass panel of his office, she saw him. He was at his desk, the scry tablet dark in front of him. He wasn't working. He was looking right at her, his expression unreadable. He had been waiting for her to leave. He gave a slow, deliberate nod. Acknowledgement. Dismissal. She wasn't sure which. Tara hurried away, her face burning. She didn't stop until she was outside, the cool afternoon air a shock against her heated skin. The safe, logical explanation that he was just protecting his project had crumbled to dust. Kimber was right. He was watching her, The most powerful, dangerous, and captivating man she had ever seen had his eyes fixed firmly on her. Fear and a wild, traitorous excitement warred within her. Tara Hayworth finally had to admit she had no idea what to do next. Chapter 9. The Inspection. Patience was a weapon Ves had wielded to build his empire. He could wait out markets, outlast rivals, and hold his ground in negotiations for months. But this was different. This wasn't business. This was the hunt, and the dragon in his blood clawed at the bars of his self-control. He had spent the afternoon watching her, a silent guardian across the hall. He saw the tension in her shoulders from the morning's encounter, but he also saw how it melted away the moment she was with the children. She was their anchor, and, he was beginning to realize, she was becoming his. When the last bell rang and the final whelp was herded out of the classroom, Ves knew his moment had come. Waiting for her in the hallway felt too much like an ambush, a repeat of Stonebrook's tactic. He would not be like the wolf. He would approach her on her own ground. He waited 10 minutes, giving her time to decompress, then rose from his desk. He crossed the corridor in 3 long strides, his heart hammering a strange, unfamiliar rhythm. He stopped before her closed door and raised his hand. He knocked. 2 sharp, deliberate raps. A moment of silence, then the door opened a few inches. Tara peered out, her brown eyes wide and wary. Seeing him, she visibly tensed, her hand tightening on the doorknob.
Mr. Virilage,
she said, her voice strained. Miss Hayworth, he replied, his tone even and professional. He held up a small, sleek device as a prop. Apologies for the intrusion. I need to conduct a brief structural scan of this wall. There are old magical conduits running through this section that aren't on the original blueprints. It will only take a moment. It was the perfect, unimpeachable excuse. She couldn't refuse. She hesitated for a beat, then opened the door wider, stepping back to allow him entry.
of course.
He stepped inside, and the sterile, controlled world he inhabited fell away. Her classroom was cluttered, to say the least. Tiny desks formed a lopsided circle. Walls breathed with whelp drawings. Vibrant, messy explosions of color depicting creatures with too many wings and magics, with crooked wands or fireballs for hands. A bookshelf overflowed with worn, well-loved storybooks, their spines cracked and taped. The air smelled of chalk dust, tempera paint, and something faintly sweet. Sugared runes, judging by the jar filled with them on Langtenham's desk. The opposite of his pristine penthouse, this room was alive. It was a home. He moved to the wall, running the detection pad over it in a slow, deliberate motion. The device was inert, but it gave him a reason to be there, a reason to observe. These big brown eyes were on him, her nervous energy a boulder pressing on his shoulder blades. Ves turned his head slightly, not looking at her directly. "Do you enjoy it?" he asked, the question slipping out, unplanned. "Teaching the little ones." Her eyes flared wide.
Yes,
she said, her voice quiet but firm.
it is good, honest in a way.
He lowered the pad, turning to face her fully. She stood by her desk, her bag clutched in front of her like a shield. "Honest?"
They're young.
She explained, a flicker of passion warming her expression.
They don't have hidden agendas. They feel what they feel. If they're happy, they shriek with laughter. If they're sad, they cry. If they accidentally set a book on fire.
A tiny, self-deprecating smile touched her lips.
Well, you've seen that.
His own mouth twitched in response. "Mondays," he recalled.
Exactly.
His gaze drifted from her face to the drawings plastered on the wall behind her. He saw one that made him pause. It was a crayon rendering of a woman with a wild storm of dark hair and a big smile, surrounded by a dozen misshapen, colorful creatures. Scrawled at the bottom in shaky letters was the name T-A-R-A. He took a step closer to it, his voice dropping. "They see you as their queen." Tara followed his gaze to the drawing, and a faint blush colored her cheeks.
They just see me as the person who has the snacks and cleans up the glitter.
"No," Ves said, turning his eyes back to her. The intensity was back, full force. "They see the person who makes them feel safe." The calm in the bustle of their day. The air crackled between them. He had crossed a line, moving from professional observation to deeply personal commentary. He was no longer a CEO inspecting a wall. He was a man seeing a woman, truly seeing her, and telling her what he saw. She stared at him, her lips parted, her shield-like bag forgotten at her side. The wariness in her eyes was being replaced by a dawning, fearful wonder. He had said enough. For now. "My inspection is complete," he said, his voice returning to its formal cadence. He took a step back toward the door, creating space between them once more. "The conduits are stable. Thank you for your time, Miss Hayworth." He gave her one last, lingering look, memorizing the flush on her cheeks and the confusion in her eyes. Then he turned and walked out, leaving her alone in the colorful, messy room that was so perfectly hers. His dragon was purring. He had not only entered her territory, he had been invited in. And he had left his mark not with power or intimidation, but with a single, honest observation. Chapter 10. The Silent Language. A month passed in a series of sharply defined moments that became a new, fragile routine. The West Corridor was no longer just a hallway. It was a territory with two rulers. Ves's office door remained perpetually ajar, a silent declaration of his presence. Tara's classroom door was his horizon. Their interactions were brief, bordering on ritualistic. A shared nod in the morning as she arrived, a quiet "Miss Hayworth" as he passed her on a rare trip to the main office. A sweet moment of silence at the end of the day when the building emptied out, and they were the last two left, separated by 30 feet of stone tiles. He never overstepped. He never cornered her. But his influence was a subtle, steady pressure. The flickering light fixture outside her classroom was suddenly replaced. A high-end, potion-proof coffee and tea synthesizer appeared in the staff room, accompanied by a generic card that read, "A courtesy from the Virilage Renovation Fund." Kimber had taken one look at it, then at Tara, and grinned.
The dragon is nesting, and he wants his queen well caffeinated.
Tara had shushed her, her cheeks burning, but she knew. They were small gestures, untraceable to him in any official capacity, but they were a language, a way of saying, "I see you. I am here." The one thing he didn't see, because she was careful to hide it, was Gar. With Ves's constant, looming presence, Gar's tactics had changed. The overt harassment stopped, replaced by a campaign of 1,000 tiny cuts. He'd appear during tutoring sessions with Lars, ostensibly to check on his son, but he'd stand too close to Tara, his tone set in an arrogant sneer as he commented on her tutoring methods.
Sure, he managed to bring his marks up from a 5 to an 8, but that is far from a 10.
Twice, he'd accidentally bumped into her in a hallway away from Ves's line of sight, once hard enough that she'd stumbled, her books scattering across the floor. He hadn't apologized, just smirked down at her before striding away. It was petty, childish, and deeply unsettling. Each time it happened, a hot spike of anger and fear went through her. And each time, the thought of telling Ves crossed her mind, only to be immediately and violently shoved aside. Her reasons were a tangled knot of pride and fear. To tell Ves would be to admit defeat. It would be admitting she couldn't handle her own problems, a confirmation of the weakness she'd fought her entire life to conceal. More than that, she was terrified of his reaction. She had seen the cold, absolute power he'd wielded to dismiss Gar before. That was just a warning shot. To officially report Gar's behavior felt like handing a loaded cannon to a man who wanted an excuse to fire it. She didn't want Gar hurt or his life ruined, no matter how much of a menace he was. He was Lars's father, after all. But the deepest reason, the one she barely admitted to herself, was that she wanted to protect the fragile, impossible thing growing between her and Ves. Their silent nods, the fixed light, the ghost of a smile they sometimes shared, was a world apart from the ugliness of Gar Stonebrook and her stack of medical bills. To bring that darkness into their quiet space felt like it would shatter the spell completely. One rainy Friday afternoon, the spell felt particularly strong. The academy was empty, the sound of the downpour a soothing drum against the windows. Tara was wiping down her desk when she saw movement. Ves was standing in her open doorway, not with a device or an excuse, but just watching her. "Long week, Miss Hayworth?" he asked, his voice a soothing rumble that matched the pattering rain outside.
"They're all long weeks, Mr. Virilage,"
she replied, offering a small, tired smile. He stepped just inside the room, leaning a shoulder against the doorframe. He looked different out of his suit jacket, his white shirt sleeves rolled up to his strong forearms. "Your studies," he said. "You're in your final year, correct?" She was surprised.
"Yes, for my mastery in early shifter education."
A difficult field, he noted, requires a unique blend of patience and magical theory.
"It's what I'm good at,"
she said simply. He was quiet for a moment, his golden eyes searching her face. "Yes," he said softly. "It is." She felt that familiar blush creep up her neck. She turned to grab her bag from the floor, hoping to hide her reaction. As she reached, her sleeve slid down slightly, revealing a dark, ugly bruise on her forearm from where Gar had bumped into her 2 days prior. She saw his eyes lock onto it. The air in the room changed instantly. The warmth vanished, replaced by a sudden, chilling stillness. The dragon had surfaced. "What happened to your arm?" His voice was flat, devoid of all emotion, which was somehow more terrifying than rage. Panic seized her. This was it. The moment the two worlds collided, she yanked her sleeve down, her heart hammering.
"Oh, it's nothing. I'm clumsy,"
she said, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle and fake even to her own ears.
"Walked right into a desk yesterday like an idiot."
It was a pathetic lie, and they both knew it. Ves didn't move from the doorway. He didn't challenge her story. He just watched her, his gaze sharp enough to see through her flimsy lie. Shame rolled like a cold stone in her stomach. After a long, tense silence, he pushed off the doorframe. He took a single step toward her, his proximity making her breath catch. He didn't look at her arm again. He looked directly into her eyes. "Be careful. Tara," he said, her name, from his mouth. He'd never said it before, not once. It landed on her skin like a smoking coal, slow and burning. Without another word, he turned and walked back to his office, leaving her standing in the middle of her classroom, the sound of the rain no longer comforting but ominous. The lie was still there, thick and heavy, lodged in the silence he'd left behind. She'd done that. She'd broken whatever had been growing between them, with one choice, one lie, and she had no idea how to fix it. Chapter 11. The Dragon's Calculus. The moment he saw the bruise, a primal, white-hot rage ignited in Ves's soul. It was the ancient, possessive fury of the dragon, an instinct that screamed to find the one responsible and incinerate them until not even ash remained. The dark purple-blue stain on her pale skin was an insult, a desecration. He knew with a certainty that went bone deep that it was not from a desk. It was the shape of a hand, a large one. Gar Stonebrook. The name was a curse in his mind. He had warned the wolf. He had established the boundary. And the cur had dared to cross it, thinking himself clever by doing it in the shadows. When she lied to him, the rage didn't lessen. It sharpened. It focused. The lie wasn't an insult to his intelligence. It was a shield. She was protecting the wolf from Ves's wrath. Or more accurately, she was protecting Ves from what she imagined his wrath would be. And she was protecting herself, her pride, her desperate attempt to remain independent. She was afraid of him, of what he would do. That realization was a shard of ice in the heart of the inferno. Her fear of him was a more profound injury than any bruise. He had wanted to press her, to demand the truth, to feel the satisfaction of her admitting she needed his protection. But he saw the panic in her eyes, the frantic plea for him to let it go. So, he'd reined in the dragon, a monstrous effort that left his muscles screaming with tension. He warned her, using her name for the first time as a deliberate, calculated strike. It was a claim, a brand of ownership she couldn't mistake, a promise that his protection was absolute. He returned to his office and sat behind his desk, not looking at the blueprints or his scry tablet. Instead, he stared at the wall, seeing nothing but the image of that bruise. The dragon demanded retribution. But the man, the CEO who had built an empire on strategy and control, knew that raw power was a blunt instrument. A clumsy, brutish response would only validate her fear and drive her further away. He would not be a brute. He would be a surgeon. He picked up his scry phone and made a single call to the head of his security. "Leroy," Ves said, his tone a dangerous calm. "I need a file. Everything you can find on Gar Stonebrook and the Golden Dawn Pack's business holdings. I want financials, contracts, pending deals, known associates, and any regulatory skeletons. I want to know where every single gold coin is buried. I want it by morning." There was no question from Leroy, a man who had worked for Ves for 20 years and knew the sound of impending annihilation.
"It will be on your desk."
Next, he sent a text to the head of the Academy Board, a man whose political campaign Ves had discreetly funded. An update on the renovation. "I'm concerned about non-essential personnel loitering on Academy grounds during operational hours, specifically Gar Stonebrook. Please ensure the campus remains a secure and professional environment for the staff. My project's timeline depends on it." It was corporate speak for "get him out." The message was clear. Gar's access to the Academy was now a liability to $1 billion project. Despite the Stonebrooks funding, phase funding, the board would act and act swiftly. As a backup measure, he filed a formal complaint via scry video against Gar Stonebrook for an unprovoked, clandestine attack on a human under his protection with the Covenant Judiciary, the ancient body that governed transgressions between all supernaturals. The arbiter on duty had been clear. An investigation would be opened immediately. Once evidence was gathered and Ves was called to give his formal testimony, Gar Stonebrook would be summoned before them to answer for his crime. And when asked how long that would take, the arbiter's eyes narrowed, his quill pausing mid-scratch. With the weary finality of someone who had heard the same question far too many times, he said,
"As long as it takes."
The wheels of their justice turned slowly, but they ground exceedingly fine. Finally, he did the one thing the dragon was screaming at him not to do. He waited. He didn't storm back to her classroom. He didn't hunt down the wolf. He sat in the silence of his office as the rain lashed against the window, and he performed the cold, hard calculus of power. Gar Stonebrook was a problem, but he was merely a symptom. The disease was Tara's fear, her poverty, the crushing weight of a world that had taught her she was alone and powerless. He could eliminate Stonebrook with a word, but it wouldn't fix the underlying issues. It wouldn't pay her bills. It wouldn't erase the medical debt that he knew, from the brief background check he'd run weeks ago, was from her foster mother's terminal illness. It wouldn't make her feel safe in her own life. Destroying the wolf was easy. It was checkers. Winning her trust, truly earning the right to be her protector, was chess. And Ves Virilage never lost at chess. Chapter 12. The Unspoken Answer. The weekend was an exercise in sustained anxiety. Tara moved through her Saturday tutoring sessions and Sunday study periods in a fog, the memory of Ves's cold, knowing eyes and the weight of his words, "Be careful, Tara," replacing her mantra. She dreaded Monday morning. She imagined the corridor would feel like a frozen tundra, his silent anger radiating from across the hall, punishing her for the lie. When she walked into the academy, however, the atmosphere was unchanged. He was in his office, the door ajar. He gave her the same brief, professional nod as always. There was no anger, no coldness. There was just watchfulness. The calm intensity was back, but now it felt different. It felt like the stillness of a predator that has already marked its prey and is simply waiting for the opportune moment. The day passed in a tense quiet. Tara felt as though she were holding her breath. The moment came during her after-academy tutoring session with Lars. They were working on celestial charting, trying to plot the moon's precise gravitational pathway for the coming cycle. Lars, his tongue sticking out in concentration, was struggling with the delicate instruments. His hand that contained more strength than finesse had trouble with the whisper-light touch required for the silver astrolabe. He kept applying too much pressure, smudging the fine charcoal lines on the vellum. The task required patience and a deep, quiet focus, not the explosive energy he was built for. The classroom door swung open without a knock. Gar Stonebrook filled the doorway, a displeased scowl on his face.
Lars, time to go.
5 more minutes, Father.
Lars pleaded, not looking up from his task.
I almost have it.
Now.
Gar snapped. He took a step into the room, his eyes finding Tara. The sneer she had come to expect was firmly in place.
I see my gold is being wisely spent,
he scoffed.
Some things can't be taught, Hayworth.
Before Tara could respond, a new figure appeared in the doorway behind Gar, Headmistress Buffer.
Mr. Stonebrook, a word, if you please,
she said. Her tone unusually firm when talking to a major donor. Gar shot her an irritated look.
I'm collecting my son.
That won't be necessary,
the headmistress stated.
Per a directive from the Academy Board, effective immediately, your access to the campus is restricted to official parent-teacher conferences only. You are no longer permitted to be on the premises during academy or after academy hours without a scheduled appointment.
The sneer on Gar's face vanished, replaced by stunned disbelief, which quickly curdled into fury. His head whipped around, his gaze locking onto Tara with pure, unadulterated venom. He took a half step toward her, his hand elongating with fur and claws.
You!
He snarled, his voice a deep growl.
You did this! You went crying to your billionaire.
Tara instinctively put a protective hand on Lars's shoulder, pulling the boy slightly behind her. Her pulse raced in her veins.
I didn't.
Mr. Stonebrook.
Buffer's voice was sharp, cutting him off.
This is an Academy Board decision regarding campus security. If you do not leave the premises now, I will be forced to contain you.
Pixie containment wasn't something any creature wanted to go through, as it involved being paralyzed by shimmering dust that simultaneously flooded the prisoner's mind with disorienting illusions and the sound of 1,000 tiny, mocking bells. It was a deeply personal and humiliating form of subjugation. Gar's face went rigid, a muscle twitching violently in his clenched jaw. His nostrils flared, but his gaze dropped to the floor for a split second before snapping back up, burning with a furious, powerless light. With a whoosh of breath, his hand shifted into a human one. He looked from Buffer to Tara, his eyes promising retribution, then back to his son.
Lars, follow me. Now.
Lars, looking terrified, scrambled to grab his bag and scurried out of the room, not daring to look at his father. Gar gave Tara one last hateful glare before turning on his heel and stalking away, while Buffer floated calmly in place, dusting a speck of imaginary lint from her shoulder with an utterly unimpressed expression. Tara sank into her chair, her legs trembling. It was over. A problem that had been a source of constant low-grade fear for weeks was simply erased. But she wasn't a fool. Academy boards didn't move that fast. Not without a push. A very, very powerful push. Ves. He had helped her. She lied to keep their worlds separate, and in response, he had simply moved the world. For her. With a resolve she didn't know she possessed, she walked out of her classroom, across the corridor, and stopped in front of his open door. Ves was at his desk, but he wasn't looking at his work. He was looking at her, waiting. He knew she would come. She didn't step inside. She stood on the threshold, her hands clenched at her sides.
Gar Stonebrook has been banned from the academy,
she said, her voice shaking only slightly. It wasn't a question. Ves leaned back in his chair, his golden eyes holding hers. He didn't feign ignorance. He didn't gloat. He simply stated a fact. His presence was a security concern.
a security concern that no one noticed until Friday afternoon,
she countered, her voice gaining strength. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, the barest admission of the truth. He had seen the bruise, heard the lie, and acted. He had done it quietly, impersonally, using the systems of power to remove the threat, without ever showing his own hand. Chapter 13. The Offering. Tara didn't remember walking back to her classroom. One moment she was pinned by his knowing gaze on the threshold of his world. The next, she was sitting at her own desk, the familiar scent of chalk and tempera paint helping to ground the swirl of her thoughts. All her life, lies had been her armor. For a child abandoned in a sterile state-run facility, truth was a liability. The truth was,
I'm scared. I'm lonely. I miss the parents I can't remember.
But the truth got you pitying looks from overworked caregivers and notes jotted down on clipboards that decided your fate. For self-preservation, she learned to lie.
I'm fine. I'm not hungry. I like it here.
When she was finally fostered at age 9 by Emma, a kind, tired woman with a gentle laugh and hands that smelled of soil and herbs, The habit was too deeply ingrained. Emma was a haven, the first real warmth Tara had ever known. And that made the fear of losing her 1,000 times worse. So, the lies continued, shifting their purpose. No longer for protection, they kept her from being a burden.
Did you finish your homework?
Yes, she'd say, even if she was struggling, staying up late to figure it out herself.
Are the kids at school being nice?
Yes, even though they teased her nonstop for being too thin and for wearing hand-me-down clothes. She had built a fortress of lies around herself so that Emma would never have a reason to send her back. Emma never would have. Tara knew that now. But the terrified 9-year-old girl still lived inside her, convinced that one wrong move, one moment of being too much trouble, would lead to abandonment. Ves's actions sent a shockwave through her beliefs. He had seen her lie, a lie born of that same deep-seated instinct to handle her own trouble, to not be a burden. And he hadn't called her out. He hadn't demanded the truth. He hadn't lectured her or punished her. He had heard the fear behind the lie and eliminated its source. She sat in her classroom until the sky outside was bruised with twilight. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about the mountain of debt or the ticking clock of the academy year. She was thinking about the man across the hall, the dragon who saw through her fortress and chose not to lay siege to it, but to guard it. The next morning, Tara came to the academy early. The corridor was quiet and empty, bathed in the pale morning light. She walked with a new purpose, not to the staff room, but directly to the high-end coffee synthesizer. She remembered his preference from the first day he'd arrived: black, strong, no sugar. She prepared 2 cups, one for herself, a milky tea. The other was a dark, fragrant coffee, poured into a trick ceramic mug. As the heat saturated the porcelain, a tiny painted witch on a broomstick began to move. She cackled silently as she flew in an endless loop around the mug's circumference, a tiny banner trailing behind her that cheekily proclaimed, "BRB, Brewing Trouble." Her heart hammered as she crossed the corridor, the warmth of the mug seeping into her palms. His door was ajar, as always. He was already at his desk, reviewing a set of holographic documents that hovered in the air. He looked up as she neared, his golden eyes immediately finding hers. The watchfulness was there, but it was softer today, expectant. She stopped at the doorway, just as she had the day before. She didn't have the words to explain the complex tangle of fear, history, and gratitude in her chest. She couldn't tell him about Emma, or the little girl who lied to survive. Not yet. Maybe never. So, she used his language. The language of quiet action. She held out the coffee. Ves's gaze dropped from her face to the mug. He laughed softly, finding her eyes. The twinkle in their golden depths undid her. He knew. Somehow. Impossibly. He knew. That the lie she'd told wasn't meant to hurt. It was armor, useless between them. He stood slowly, closing the small space between them with a quiet kind of intent that made her breath catch. For a heartbeat, she panicked. Maybe she'd imagined the shift in him. Maybe she'd reached too far. He reached out, fingers brushing hers as he took the mug from her hands. Just that. Bare skin grazing bare skin. A touch so brief, it barely registered as real. But it was. And it jolted through her like heat meeting cold. It was the first time they'd ever touched. and it startled her, the way her body instantly wanted more. Not in a way she'd ever felt before. Not like this, not like him.
One touch won't be enough, Tara.
The realization hollowed her out. It came from her depth of wanting. It reached from the top of her forehead to the tips of her toes. And it was terrifying. He looked down at the dark liquid, then back at her. A smile, the first genuine one she had ever seen from him, touched both corners of his sculpted mouth. "Thank you, Tara," he said, his voice a seductive rumble. Chapter 14. The Dragon's Gambit. Ves sat at his desk, the ceramic mug warm in his hands long after he had finished its contents. It was, objectively, just coffee. But in the silent, intricate language they were developing, it was a white flag raised over a battlefield of fear and mistrust. It was the first time she had willingly crossed the corridor, not out of necessity, but to offer him something. A gift. The dragon in his soul, the ancient possessive creature that saw her as the sole treasure in a world of dust, roared in triumph.
She submits. She sees the bond. Take her, shelter her, bind her to you so she may never be frightened or harmed again.
He shut the instinct down with brutal efficiency. The man, the CEO, the strategist who had built an empire by understanding the motivations of others, knew that the dragon's way would be a catastrophe. Taking her would make him the monster she was so afraid of. He had seen the shadows in her eyes. She was a creature who had been caged before, and she would rather break herself against the bars than ever be imprisoned again, no matter how gilded the cage. So, he waited. He drank the coffee she had brought him and worked, the hum of her classroom a backdrop to his complex calculations. At the end of the day, when the halls had emptied and the familiar, charged silence fell between his office and her classroom, he rose. He picked up a set of rolled blueprints that gave him a valid reason. He found her not at her desk, but standing by the window, staring out at the setting sun that painted the playground in hues of orange and gold. "Miss Hayworth," he began, his voice softer than he intended. She turned.
Mr. Virilage.
She didn't seem surprised to see him. In fact, she almost seemed relieved. "I was hoping I could get your professional opinion on something," he said, unrolling the blueprints on an empty student's table. He gestured for her to come closer. She hesitated for only a second before walking over, her arms crossed over her chest as she looked down at the complex diagrams. "These are the plans for the new wing's elemental classrooms," he explained, pointing to a section. "Specifically, the environmental regulators and magical absorption vents. My engineers have designed them for maximum efficiency, but they are theorists. You are a practitioner. You know what these children actually need." He watched her as she leaned in, her focus shifting entirely to the plans. A small frown creased her brow.
The absorption rate is too high,
she said, her voice sure and clear.
You'll leach the ambient magic from the room. The younger shifters, the ones still learning control, they draw on that. It's like taking the training wheels off a bike before the child knows how to balance. They'll struggle, and they'll think the failure is theirs.
She spoke with a quiet passion, her hands gesturing over the blueprints, explaining the subtle symbiotic relationship between a young shifter and their environment. He listened, utterly captivated. She was indeed the queen his dragon had recognized, a fierce, intelligent protector of her domain. "You fight for them," he said when she finished, the observation slipping out, more personal than he'd planned. She stilled, her gaze falling from the plans.
Someone has to,
she said softly.
They deserve a chance, more than I ever had.
It was the closest she'd ever come to revealing a piece of herself. The opening he had been waiting for. He had to tread carefully. The Virilage Corporation maintains a significant educational endowment fund, he began, his tone measured and deliberate. It provides grants. For promising students who need support. He paused, letting the words settle before delivering the gambit. And for exceptional educators pursuing advanced mastery in critical fields, to allow them to complete their studies without financial burden. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide. He saw the flicker of hope, immediately followed by the shadow of suspicion. It's a formal application process, he continued, before her mistrust could take hold. Judged on merit by an independent board, your interspecies coordinator, Mr. Abernathy, has all the details. She stared at him, her internal conflict written plainly on her face. It was a lifeline, but it came from him. Could she trust it? Could she allow herself to take it? He rolled up the blueprints, creating a space between them once more. He had laid his cards on the table. Now, the choice was hers. Think about it, he said, his voice dropping to that sensual, intimate register. The offer is based on merit, Tara. Nothing else. He turned and walked out of her classroom, leaving her standing in the twilight with the echo of her name and a new blueprint for a brighter future. As for him, he had ceded control. For a dragon, it was the most unnatural feeling in the world. And damn if it didn't feel like a victory. Chapter 15. The Application. Tara stood frozen in the middle of her classroom. Ves had just offered her a future she had long since given up on, a dream relegated to the realm of impossible fantasy. Her first instinct was suspicion. The offer was too perfect. A rescue so elegantly constructed she feared it was a trap. She knew men like Ves Virilage didn't offer charity. They engineered situations. He had seen her foolish pride and built a stage where she could accept his help without feeling like she was taking a handout. But back in her apartment, the oppressive stack of bills, a monument to her failure to save Emma, was a crushing reality. She had taken on the debt without hesitation when Emma got sick, determined to give the only mother she had ever known the best care, to buy her more time. But it hadn't been enough. Emma had passed away, and Tara was left with nothing but grief and a financial burden so immense it flattened her soul. It felt like admitting she was a burden, the very thing she had spent her life trying not to be. And yet, the offer was there. A ladder out of a pit she had been digging herself deeper into for years. The next day, fueled by a desperate sliver of hope, she approached Abernathy's office.
Ah, Tara. Come in,
he said, beaming. He seemed almost giddy.
Did Mr. Virilage speak to you? About the endowment?
Tara's guard was up.
He mentioned it. I wanted to ask if you knew anything about it.
Know about it? It's the talk of the educational sector.
Abernathy spun his monitor around. On the screen was a sleek, professional web portal, the Virilage Educational Endowment Fund.
It's completely legitimate, top tier. They gave a full mastery grant to a physics teacher in the Northern Territory last year. Completely changed the man's life. The board is made up of retired academics. Totally impartial. Mr. Virilage funds it, but he has no say in the selection process. It's all about merit.
His genuine enthusiasm immediately dissipated her suspicions. He wasn't in on it. This was real. Ves hadn't created a phantom program for her. He had simply pointed her toward a real one he knew she would qualify for. He had opened a door. It was still up to her to walk through it. That night, she sat at her small kitchen table, her laptop open to the application portal. For a long time, she just stared at the login screen. Then, taking a breath that felt like plunging into icy water, she began. The first sections were easy: name, address, academic history. Then came the essays.
Describe the personal or financial hardships you have faced in your educational journey.
Her fingers trembled over the keyboard. She had never told anyone the full story. Not the counselors, not Kimber, not even Emma. She had built a fortress of
I'm fine,
and
I can handle it.
Now, an impersonal text box demanded the truth. Hesitantly, she began to type. She wrote about being a ward of the state. She wrote about the constant gnawing fear of being unwanted, of being too much trouble. She wrote about Emma and the crushing debt she took on not as a burden, but as a desperate act of love. She wrote about the exhaustion, the fear, the loneliness. The words poured out of her, a confession to a faceless machine. It was like lancing a wound that had been festering for a long while. The next question was,
what are your long-term goals, and how will this grant help you achieve them?
Here, the words came easily. She wrote of her passion for teaching, for reaching the children who fell through the cracks, the quiet ones, the difficult ones, the ones like her. She wrote about wanting to gain a mastery in elemental theory not for prestige, but to give those children the tools they needed to build a life for themselves. She was laying her entire soul bare, not for a man, but for a chance. Finally, it was done. The entire unvarnished truth of her life was contained in the application. All that was left was a single button at the bottom of the page. Submit. She stared at it, her heart thudding. This was it. The point of no return. Clicking that button was an admission that she couldn't do it alone. It was placing a fragile, terrifying kernel of trust in the path Ves Virilage had laid out for her. It was a leap of faith. Her finger hovered over the trackpad, trembling. Then she closed her eyes and clicked. Chapter 16. The Acknowledgement. The morning after hitting submit was agony. Tara woke with what she could only describe as a vulnerability hangover. Every nerve ending felt exposed, raw. She had taken the entire messy, secret history of her life and uploaded it to a server. To him. The thought that Ves Virilage could, with a few keystrokes, read about her deepest fears and failures made her want to crawl out of her skin. Walking into the academy felt different. The corridor, their silent battlefield and bridge, seemed 100 miles long. She was braced for anything. A look of pity, a smirk of triumph, or worse, a complete cold indifference that would signal he hadn't even noticed. He was already there, but not in his office. He was standing in the middle of the corridor, holding 2 identical ceramic mugs. As she approached, her steps slowing, he turned. He held one of the mugs out to her. It was tea, just the way she liked it, with oat milk and 2 sugars, strong and fragrant. Her offering from before, now returned. The gesture was so unexpected it short-circuited her anxiety. Her hand was trembling slightly as she took it, her fingers brushing his. There was the same brief electric warmth as before, but this time it felt less like an accident and more like a deliberate connection. "Good morning, Tara," he said.
Good morning,
She managed, her voice barely more than a whisper. She cleared her throat, trying again.
Good morning, Ves.
She hadn't expected to love saying his name, but she did. Too much. It tasted dangerous on her tongue. And still, she wanted to say it again. He smiled at that, slow and easy, lighting up the corridor like sunlight breaking through clouds. A flash of perfect teeth, warm and devastating. She forgot how to breathe. My engineers reviewed your notes on the elemental classroom vents, he said, taking a sip from his own mug. He fell into step beside her as she instinctively moved toward her classroom. They were impressed. They had focused entirely on magical containment and not at all on the developmental needs of the students. They're redrafting the plans now. He was validating her, not as a recipient of his potential charity, but as a professional whose expertise he valued. He was shoring up the pride he knew he had just asked her to risk.
I'm glad I could help,
She said, finding her footing. There was something else I would like to discuss with you. They stopped at her classroom door, the air humming between them like a live wire. You have passion, Ves stated, his eyes locking with hers. My foundation is starting a new center for at-risk whelps. We need that passion. He was offering her not a handout, but a purpose, a seat at his table. Her throat went dry. We need you. I need you, he confessed, closing the distance between them. The professional space vanished, replaced by something personal, intimate, seductive. His gaze fell to her mouth, and the world narrowed to the few inches that separated them. His hand came up, his thumb brushing her jawline with an impossibly gentle touch. His head dipped, his golden eyes dark with a hunger that mirrored her own. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she leaned into his touch. He leaned down, his intent unmistakable. Tara's breath hitched, her eyes closing as she tilted her head up to meet him. This was it. This was real. Bang!
Oops!
A blur of motion. A lanky teenage shifter, all elbows and knees, stumbled past them, the books he'd dropped weighing down his arms. Tara and Ves sprang apart.
Sorry, Miss Tara. Sorry, sir.
He mumbled before scurrying away. The moment was gone, replaced by a thick, ringing awkwardness. Ves dropped his hand, his expression unreadable.
Yes.
She breathed into the silence, answering his unasked question and the one before it.
I'm interested.
A slow, dangerous smile touched his lips, a promise of future encounters. Good, he said. He turned and walked away without another glance, leaving Tara leaning against the doorframe, her fingers pressed to lips that still tingled with a kiss they had never received. Chapter 17. The Invitation. The rest of the day passed in the snap of a dragon tail. Tara moved through the classroom on autopilot, the children's voices distant, her mind circling the moment in the corridor. The near kiss, the way his hand had brushed her jaw like it was the most precious thing he'd ever touched, and the way she had wanted it. By dismissal, her chest was tight with a strange cocktail of nerves and restless energy. She stacked books, tidied desks, anything to delay walking out into the quiet hall where she knew he still lingered. When she finally forced herself to leave, she saw Ves standing with one of his men, speaking in low tones. Businesslike, controlled. Every inch the CEO and the dragon. She slowed, half hoping he would glance her way, half praying he wouldn't. She wanted to cross the corridor, to ask him to join her for a beverage, dinner, something that belonged to them and not this charged in between. But his attention stayed on the conversation. Disappointment pressed heavy in her chest as she walked past, clutching her bag a little tighter. She told herself not to care, not to want. But the wanting couldn't be canceled, shushed, or done away with. It had nestled deep into her bones, almost if it were a life force on its own. Her little beat-up car waited faithfully in the lot, or so she thought. She slid into the driver's seat, turned the key. Nothing. Not even a sputter. She tried again. Still, nothing.
Oh, come on.
she muttered, slamming her palm against the wheel. Trouble? Her head jerked up. Ves stood at her window, his jacket slung over one arm, golden eyes fixed on her. He must have followed her out. Of course he had. She rolled down the glass, forcing a rueful smile.
It won't start.
He was already moving closer. Then you shouldn't be driving it. His tone brooked no argument, though his mouth softened at the corners. I'll have it towed to one of my mechanics. They'll sort it out. Before she could protest, he added, almost casually, in the meantime, I'll take you home. Or better. His gaze swept over her, slow, deliberate. Let me fly you somewhere for dinner. Her breath caught. The image unfurled instantly, riding on his massive back, the wind tearing past, the ground falling away. Dinner with him, away from the academy, away from polite, professional distance. Just them. Oh, how she wanted to say yes. But want was dangerous. Want was terrifying. Because flying on his back wasn't just transportation. It was a dream she'd never dared speak aloud. She had watched him soar into the sky more than once, his joy written in every beat of his wings, every arc through the clouds. He was never more himself than when he was in the air, untethered, free. And in the dead of night, when she couldn't sleep, she had imagined what it would be like to share that with him, to hold on, to feel the wind tear past as the world fell away beneath them, to just be with him.
I dash.
Tara!
Emma's familiar voice cut across the lot. Her friend hurried toward them, keys in hand.
Car trouble?
Relief tangled with longing inside her. She swallowed, giving Ves a quick shake of her head.
Emma can give me a ride, but thank you.
For the first time, she saw it. A flicker of disappointment in his eyes. Subtle, quickly shuttered, but real. The sting of it made her reckless.
But if you'd like, I could cook for you tomorrow night.
The words tumbled out before she could stop them, her pulse racing at the thought of rejection. His smile in answer was devastating. Car troubles, homework, recess duty the next day. It all faded away. I would like that very much. Emma called again, and Tara reluctantly pulled herself from the car. As she walked away, she glanced back once. Ves still stood beside her useless vehicle, watching her go, that smile lingering, lighting up her world. Tomorrow couldn't come soon enough. He had nearly kissed her. The smoothness of her skin against his thumb, the way she had leaned in, just enough, just right. The dragon inside him was a storm of fury and desire, prowling against his restraint.
Take her, claim her, she is ours.
But he had pulled back, because to take her before she chose him wouldn't win her heart. So he had let her go. And now, watching her from across the parking lot, disappointment coiled through him like smoke. She wanted to talk to him. He had seen it in her eyes before she passed. He should have dismissed his man sooner. He should have given her the chance. Instead, he found her sitting in a useless hunk of metal that dared call itself transportation. Broken, inadequate, unworthy of her. His dragon snarled at the sight. It was almost a relief, striding forward, offering what he wanted to offer. Not charity, not power, but himself. The flight, a dinner, the beginning of something real. For the barest moment he thought she might say yes. Her lips parted, her pulse jumped, his heart hammered, already tasting the wind, already imagining her on his back. And then, her friend, Emma. The interruption cost him the moment, just as the boy in the corridor had. Fate seemed determined to mock him with missed chances. Still, he caught the disappointment in Tara's gaze as she turned him down. She wanted to say yes. She had been tempted. That was something. And then she had said it.
I could cook for you tomorrow night.
The words had struck him harder than any victory in a boardroom. An invitation into her space, her trust. The dragon inside him roared in triumph. Tara had offered him a place at her table, her nest, the most intimate of invitations. He had smiled, slow and certain, the only answer possible. He would take whatever she offered, however small, and guard it as treasure. As she walked away with Emma, Ves stood beside her broken car, hands curling into fists against the urge to simply carry her off then and there. His instincts screamed for immediacy, but he had learned patience the hard way. Tomorrow she would cook for him. Tomorrow he would sit in her world, not his. Tomorrow he would prove to her that she was not a prize to be claimed, but a partner to be chosen. Chapter 18. A Greater Need. Ves had not liked the neighborhood the first time he'd come here. He had circled above, cloaked in shadow, unseen by the humans below. The streets were narrow, littered with cracked pavement and overflowing bins. Too many lights were broken, leaving long stretches in darkness. A predator's playground. The kind of place where something could happen to her in the span of a heartbeat, and no one would be the wiser. It was not worthy of her. Tonight, his wings carried him over the same rooftops, his dragon's vision taking in the rusting air conditioning units, the sagging railings, the careless way the buildings had been patched together over the years. His penthouse was marble and glass, precision and strength. This was none of those things. It offended every protective instinct in him that she lived here. And then he saw her. The rooftop door creaked open, and Tara stepped out into the fading light. Not dressed for war in her neat teacher's skirts, not armored in professionalism. She wore soft jeans, a faded shirt, and an apron streaked with something that looked like tomato sauce. A stray lock of hair clung to her cheek, and she was radiant. The dragon in him went silent, reverent. She stood in the middle of this shabby roof, the rarest piece in his vast hoard. His treasure made flesh. He swooped down, wings folding as he landed in a rush of displaced air. His body shifted even before his claws touched concrete, scales melting to skin, muscle to sinew. In moments, the dragon was gone, and the man stood in its place, dressed deliberately plain. Dark jeans, a blue shirt, sleeves rolled up. Her gaze swept over him, lingering just long enough to betray her admiration before she smiled. Sincere, warm, a welcome that reached him deeper than any bow, any boardroom victory, any battle cry. It undid him. Ves closed the distance in 3 strides. He didn't ask, couldn't. Her scent, her smile, the knowledge that she had invited him here, into her world, into her home, was too much. He pulled her into his arms, and before either of them could speak, he kissed her. It was not tentative. It was not polite. It was the kind of kiss a dragon gave when he found something worth burning for. And she didn't pull away. Her hands clutched his shirt, her mouth opening to his, her breath catching as though she had been waiting for this just as long as he had. The rooftop, the city, the whole imperfect world around them fell away. There was only her, his treasure, his Tara. The world steadied only when he broke the kiss, his forehead resting against hers. Tara's breath came in soft, uneven waves, Her fingers still knotted in his shirt, as if letting go would drop her into the sky itself.
I should...
She whispered, a faint laugh breaking through the daze.
The lasagna...
Ves glanced toward the rooftop door. It can wait. She hesitated, then nodded. Together, they slipped inside. The small apartment smelled of herbs and baking cheese, warm and human and wholly hers. Tara moved to the oven, flicking the dial off with a trembling hand. The dish could keep. Tonight, food was the last thing either of them needed. When she turned back to him, he was already watching her. No armor, no walls, just a man, no, a dragon, standing in the middle of her kitchen as though he had waited lifetimes for this moment. Her throat tightened.
Ves, I need to say, this isn't my first time. I'm sorry if that...
He was across the room before she could finish, one finger pressing gently to her lips. His gaze held hers, steady and fierce. No apologies, he murmured, voice rough with something deeper than desire. What came before doesn't matter. Her eyes stung, the weight of his words striking somewhere deeper than she had thought possible. And then he kissed her again, slower this time, reverent. A promise sealed in the press of lips, in the careful way his hand cupped her face, as though she were something breakable and priceless all at once. The rest happened in a dream. Clothes loosened and fell away without urgency. Each piece surrendered, like another layer of fear shed between them. They moved together through her narrow hallway, laughter breaking between kisses when they stumbled against a wall, his large shoulder knocking a needlepoint off the wall. He bent to pick it up, but she tugged him through the door to her bedroom. There was no rush. Every touch was exploration. Every sigh, every glance was a discovery. His hands lingered as though memorizing her curves. Hers traced the strong lines of him with equal awe. And when they finally came together, it was not conquest, not possession. It was homecoming. She clung to him, gasping at the flood of sensation, and he whispered against her throat, her ear. Her lips words of comfort, of reverence, of unspoken love he didn't name but could no longer deny. Their bodies found a rhythm older than language, each movement a declaration. I see you. I choose you. I will not let you go. Time unraveled. There was no apartment, no city outside, no dragon and no human. Only two souls colliding, breaking, and becoming something whole. When the storm finally eased, she lay against his chest, her breath slowing, her heart steadying against the solid thrum of his. He held her as though she were the only treasure worth guarding, his hand tracing lazy circles on her back. She had thought intimacy would leave her feeling vulnerable, small. Instead, she felt infinite. Ves pressed a kiss to her hair, his tone carrying a solid vow. What we have starts here, now. Tonight and every night after will always be a new beginning. And in the quiet that followed, she realized. She believed him. Chapter 19. The Weekend. The weekend unfolded like nothing Ves had ever known. It wasn't the fire of their first night, though there was plenty of that. No, it was what came after, the softer hours stretched out between dawn and dusk. Hours filled with the sound of her laughter in his arms, the warmth of her tangled hair across his chest, the quiet cadence of two people finally daring to speak truths that had lived too long in silence. They shared food, shared touches, shared stories. Late on Saturday, as they sat at her small kitchen table, Tara stirred oat milk into her mug, her gaze distant.
I never really knew my parents,
she said at last.
I was a ward of the state from the time I was small. You learn to make yourself invisible, to not be a bother.
Invisible. The word pierced him. Dragons did not hide their young. They guarded them with tooth and flame. His dragon stirred, a harsh growl echoing in his soul. She paused, and then her face softened.
Then Emma came, my foster mother. She was the first person who ever chose me. The only one.
Chosen. That word rang louder still, reverberating through him like a vow. The dragon inside him surged against its cage. We choose her back, forever.
She got sick when I was in my first year of university.
Tara continued, her voice quiet but steady.
The kind of sick that eats everything. Your health, your time, your money. I dropped out to take care of her. I don't regret the time, not a second of it. But the bills.
She shook her head, eyes fixed on the swirling milk as if it held the memory.
They didn't stop, even after she was gone. She gave me everything she had, and I couldn't save her.
He reached across the table, closing his hand over hers. Her skin trembled beneath his, but she didn't pull away. You gave her something greater, he said. You gave her love she would never have had otherwise. No debt can erase that. Her eyes shone, and for once she didn't argue. When it was his turn, Ves told her of his parents, of the veil, that shimmering boundary where supernaturals could pass when this world wearied them, stepping into something freer, brighter. He spoke of watching them go, young and unready, and how that loss had carved both the man and the dragon. She listened, her hand still in his, her gaze steady, not pitying, not doubting, simply there. They filled the hours that way, sharing, teasing, touching, each confession another thread binding them together, each kiss another seal. And yet, one longing remained unspoken. On Sunday evening, as twilight gathered and the city below them glowed with 1,000 lights, Ves drew her to the rooftop. The wind tugged at her hair, carrying the scent of her warmth, her laughter, her stubborn courage. She stood at the edge, uncertain, her hands gripping the railing.
I don't know if I can,
she whispered. He stepped behind her, his arms encircling her waist, his breath warm against her ear. You can. Her pulse fluttered beneath his touch, fast and frantic. I won't let you fall, Tara. Not now. Not ever. When you fly with me, you're not a passenger. You're my mate, my equal, my choice, and mine to protect for as long as I breathe. The word hung between them, mate, as vast and irrevocable as the sky itself. Her breath hitched, her head turning just enough that he could see the shimmer of tears in her eyes. And then, slowly, she nodded. His dragon surged with joy as he lifted her into his arms, scales rippling through his skin, wings unfurling against the last rays of the sun. And together, for the first time, they took to the sky. Chapter 20. The Sky in Her Veins. Tara would never forget the first time she flew. The way the ground had dropped away in a rush of wind and sound, her heart leaping as though it might burst from her chest. The way Ves's body had shifted beneath her hands, muscle and power melding into scales and wings, each beat driving them higher, farther. The city below had become a scatter of lights, small and fragile, while above them stretched a boundless sky. She had pressed her cheek against the line of his neck, and for once in her life, she hadn't felt invisible. She had felt safe, chosen. Tara carried that feeling with her through the days that followed, replaying every moment in her mind like a secret she couldn't stop touching. But he hadn't been there, His office across the corridor had stayed dark all week. With regret in her eyes, he told her that he had business in another territory, finalizing some new project for his vast corporation. She told herself it made sense. He was a man with empires to manage, responsibilities that stretched far beyond one academy. Still, she had caught herself glancing at his door more times than she could count, each time hoping it might suddenly open. It never did. The absence hollowed her in ways she hadn't expected. She missed him. Terribly. Not just the thrill of his presence. Not just the way the air seemed to hum when he was near. She missed him. His steady voice, his sharp mind, the quiet, unguarded looks he gave her when no one else was watching. He sent her texts, sure. But it wasn't the same. Words on a screen couldn't fill the space he left behind. By Friday afternoon, anticipation burned through her like a live wire. She was supposed to meet him in the city, at a new tea shop she had mentioned in passing. And of course, Ves had remembered. Ves Virilage, with his endless responsibilities, had remembered a small wish of hers and made time for her. Just one night together before she left for her former hometown to visit Emma's grave on her birthday and see Emma's old friends, a group of ladies who still played cards once a week. She drove with the window down, the cool autumn wind brushing her face as she left the campus behind. Her old car had given up the spirit earlier in the week, and before he left, Ves had arranged a loaner. She had expected something modest, simple, not the armored tank that gleamed in her parking spot. It wasn't huge, but she could sense that it was reinforced with more than airbags. Strength shimmered in the frame itself, quiet threads of magic woven into the metal. When she texted him to ask why, his reply had been simple. "I just want to keep you safe." She hadn't known what to say back. The words had landed with startling weight, leaving her blinking down at the glowing screen, her throat tight. No one had ever said something like that to her and meant it. Not protection for what she could do, not obligation, just her. Her fingers had hovered over the keyboard before she gave up on words entirely and sent only a heart. Now, as the hum of the loaner car, still carrying its sharp new smell, filled the cabin, her mind drifted elsewhere. The sound of tires on asphalt faded into memory, the thunder of wings, the rush of air, the dizzying freedom of the sky. She daydreamed shamelessly, her grip on the steering wheel loosening as she pictured the city shrinking to nothing beneath them, the stars above wheeling bright and eternal.
Tonight, tea with Ves. Tomorrow, Emma.
And as the city skyline rose before her, Tara realized the sky wasn't something she had left behind. It was still in her veins, humming, waiting. Chapter 21. Tea and Promises. The little tea shop was tucked into a side street, all warm lamplight and glass jars of leaves stacked in tidy rows. Tara spotted him instantly, hard not to, even in jeans and an open-necked shirt. Ves drew the gaze like iron to a magnet. He stood when she walked in, and the heat in his golden eyes made the whole week of waiting dissolve into nothing.
"Hi,"
she said, breathless despite herself. "Tara." He pulled out her chair as though the gesture were second nature. She sat, her pulse tripping as his hand brushed her shoulder. The server appeared, and they ordered without much thought, her favorite blend, which Ves remembered, and something darker for him. When they were alone again, the silence between them hummed with unspoken things until Ves leaned back, studying her. "I missed this," he said simply, "being with you." Her heart squeezed.
"Same. I hope it went well, though."
He nodded. "Another territory. A project that needed my signature. No worries. He sipped his tea, eyes drifting toward the window, but his voice softened when he went on. When I was a boy, after my parents crossed the veil, flying was the only thing that made sense. Up there was no weight, no loss, just wind and sky and freedom. It was the only time I didn't feel hollow. Tara's fingers wrapped around her mug, warmth seeping into her palms.
I think I understand that,
She said quietly.
Emma. She filled that empty space for me. After she passed, I carried her with me in different ways, like this weekend. I'm visiting her grave tomorrow and some of her old friends. The card group.
She smiled faintly.
They still play every week, and they cheat. Ruthlessly. Emma used to hide cards in the cuff of her sleeve, claimed it was strategy, not cheating.
Ves laughed then, a deep, startled sound that lit up his face. Tara stared, marveling at the way it transformed him, stripping away the CEO, the dragon, leaving only the man. She wanted more of that, more of him, always.
I wish I didn't have to leave in the morning,
She admitted. The words slipped out before she could stop them.
I really missed you.
His gaze sharpened, heat curling at the edges. I could fly you. We'd be there in an hour. We could have the weekend together. The image rose instantly, his wings cutting through the night, her arms around him, days spent wrapped in him instead of old memories. She wanted to say yes so very much, but she shook her head.
I can't. Not this time. I need to be ready. For them. And for me. But soon. I want you to meet Emma's friends. They were her family, which means they're mine too.
Ves's expression softened, his hand reaching across the table to cover hers. Then I'll wait. And when you're ready, I'll be there. The rest of the evening blurred, laughter and stolen glances filling the small space between them. And when she drove them back to her place, she didn't hesitate to unlock the door and pull him inside. The week apart had been too long. They kissed like it, touched like it, every moment edged with urgency. The lasagna she wanted to reheat and serve him for dinner lay forgotten in fridge as they tumbled toward the bedroom. Laughter breaking between kisses until there was nothing left but the press of mouths and the sheer relief of closeness. Afterward, tangled in sheets, Tara let out a breathless laugh.
If that's what I have to look forward to after a week apart, maybe I should stay away longer.
Ves growled deep in his chest, rolling her back into his arms. Don't you dare! His mouth found hers again, claiming, hungry. I've had enough waiting. And this time, neither of them stopped. Chapter 22. The Breaking Point. Hope was a dangerous, unfamiliar feeling. It fluttered in Tara's chest like a nervous bird taking flight as she steered her car along the winding road that climbed into the elevated suburbs where Ves lived. She had returned from Emma's town that very morning. The quiet days of tending the grave and walking through old memories with old friends seemed like a lifetime ago. Now there was only tonight. He had called her the night before, his voice a pleasant rumble through the phone as they finalized their plans. A quiet dinner. At his home. Then afterward. Her heart leapt at the thought. The radio played some overproduced pop ballad about beginnings and everlasting love, and she sang along, off-key, breathless, grinning at her own terrible voice. She didn't care. The joy fizzed inside her, wild and uncontainable. Because tonight, she would tell him. She would throw off every chain, break down every wall. She would stand bare before him, not her body, but her soul. And she would say the words she had never said to anyone else.
I love you.
The thought lit her from the inside, carrying her through the curves of the darkening road. Then, movement, a large shadow at the edge of her vision. Before she could register it, the world cracked open. Bang! The sound was violent, percussive like a gunshot. Her front passenger tire blew apart, and the car lurched savagely to the right. The steering wheel wrenched from her grip, spinning like a living thing.
No!
Tara screamed, fighting it with all her strength. The tires shrieked, rubber burned, the smell of it clogged her throat, acrid and hot. Ahead, the metal guardrail rushed toward her like a silver blade. The impact was instant, bone-rattling. The barrier groaned, buckled, and then snapped under the car's weight. Time fractured. The windshield became a kaleidoscope of green trees and gray sky as the car tipped over the edge. The first impact slammed her forward, the seatbelt biting into her ribs. Then came another, harder, the roof caving against an oak, metal crunching, glass bursting. Pain detonated behind her eyes, white-hot and blinding. Her last awareness was sound, the delicate, crystalline shatter of the windshield tinkling across her skin like falling stars. And then, nothing. Ves stood on the balcony of his penthouse, the city sprawling in jeweled lights beneath him. He was watching the path her car would take, following the trickle of traffic with sharpened vision, a boyish anticipation thrumming through him that he hadn't felt in centuries. He had dismissed his entire household staff for the night. No distractions, no witnesses. He'd even prepared the meal himself, an elegant, simple dish he had learned ages ago, when cooking had been necessity rather than luxury. Tonight was not about impressing her with wealth or power. Tonight was about honesty, about Tara, and the words he longed to hear from her lips. He could sense her. The silvery thread between them had grown stronger in recent weeks, spun from the first mug of coffee, strengthened in every kiss, every truth they had shared. It hummed now with her energy, bright, nervous, full of anticipation that mirrored his own. He smiled, turning to go inside, and then the thread snapped. Not sound, not sight, but a feeling as violent as it was undeniable. A surge of terror washed through him, hers, raw and piercing. It tore into him with the echo of pain, sharp and concussive. And then, nothing. A void where her bright, stubborn presence had been a heartbeat before. Tara. Her name left his mouth as a strangled whisper. Every ounce of civility, every layer of the human mask he wore, was incinerated in an instant. He vaulted the balcony railing, and in the space between one heartbeat and the next, the man was gone. Scales erupted across his skin, obsidian edged with the gold of the sun's dying rays. His bones cracked and stretched, reshaping, wings unfurling with a sound like sails catching a storm wind. The dragon, unleashed and terrible, roared into the night sky, a sound of grief and fury that rattled windows for miles. He didn't need a map. He followed the dying echo of her fear, the faint stain of her pain on the wind. In seconds he saw it, the shattered guardrail, the path of destruction carved down the ravine. And at the bottom, the car he had given her, a broken toy twisted around a tree. He landed hard, the ground trembling under his weight. Rage blazed white-hot in his chest, but the thought of hurt, or worse, doused it with ice. He shifted down, not fully human, not fully dragon, scaled claws and sinewed muscle compact, brutal. He ripped the driver's door free and tossed it aside like scrap. She was there, slumped against the seatbelt, head tilted, a thin trickle of blood marking her temple. Too still, too quiet. A sound escaped him, half growl, half whimper. He forced his claws to retract enough to slice through the seatbelt with care. Gently, impossibly gently for a creature that could tear through steel, he gathered her against his chest. She was terrifyingly light. A hospital was unthinkable. Too slow, too public, too vulnerable. His penthouse was the best place. It was a fortress. Only there could she be safe. With one sweep of his wings, he launched skyward, the fury of his flight scattering clouds. He held her carefully with his talons, her cold body pressed against his warm flesh. He landed on his balcony in a crash of air and carried her through the darkened rooms, past the waiting table and untouched dinner, into the sanctuary of his private suite. He laid her gently on the wide expanse of his bed, her pale face stark against the black silk sheets. His fingers shook as he pulled out his scry phone and dialed his personal healer. "Eris," he growled, his tone lethal. "Get to my penthouse. Now. There's been an accident." He ended the call without waiting. Ves sank to the edge of the bed, brushing a blood-matted strand of hair from her cheek. If she had been in that old tin can of hers, instead of the reinforced car he had given her. His dragon snarled their pain, a guttural sound that rumbled through his chest. He doubled over, pressing his forehead to the mattress beside her hand, just barely managing not to partially shift. Let his claws gouge deep furrows into the carved wood of the bed frame as though he could shred fate itself. Every instinct screamed to destroy, to hunt, to burn, to tear apart. Something. But he forced the beast back, trembling as he lifted her hand and pressed it against his lips. "Mine," he whispered, voice raw. "You will not leave me." Chapter 23. The Price of Silence. The first thing Tara registered was the scent of clean linen and something else, something faintly metallic and wild, like a storm just over the horizon. The second was the impossible softness of the sheets against her skin. She pried her eyes open, blinking against the dim light of a room she didn't recognize. Her head throbbed with a dull, persistent ache. A figure shifted in a chair beside the bed, and her breath caught. It was Ves. He was simply watching her, his expression unreadable in the shadows, his stillness that of a mountain. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her.
"What? Where am I? The car."
Memories fractured and returned. The wrenching of the wheel, the sickening crunch of metal in the spider web of glass. "You're in my home. You're safe," he said, his voice a low, calming rumble that seemed to vibrate through the very air. He leaned forward, and the light from a distant window caught the hard lines of his face. The fury she saw simmering in the depths of his eyes was terrifying, but she knew with absolute certainty that none of it was directed at her. "The doctor has already been here," he continued, preempting her next dozen questions. "You have a slight concussion, a sprained ankle, and some impressive bruising on your arm and ribs." His orders were unequivocal. Rest. She pushed herself up, a wave of dizziness washing over her. Her left ankle was wrapped snugly, and she hissed at the tender ache along her right arm.
"I can't stay here, Ves. I have to."
"You have to rest," he interrupted, his tone gentle but absolute. "You will stay here, where I can make sure you do." "I'm not taking no for an answer, Tara." The finality in his voice left no room for argument. She was a guest, but she was also, in a way, his captive. She was unsure if she liked the idea or not. A wave of exhaustion washed over her, and she sank back into the pillows, no longer able to debate the issue.
"Okay,"
she whispered. In the end, she was glad she stayed. He took care of her. He brought her takeout from a small Thai restaurant she loved, and they sat on the enormous bed, propped up by a mountain of pillows, watching old black and white movies on a screen that emerged silently from the ceiling. In the warm, safe cocoon of his room, the outside world and its dangers felt far away. She found herself relaxing in his presence, the constant tension in her shoulders finally unspooling. As the third movie played, her eyelids grew heavy, and her head drifted sideways to rest on his shoulder. He didn't move. He was a warm, solid presence beside her. As she surrendered to the pull of sleep, she registered a rumble vibrate through his chest, and a voice that might have been part of the movie or part of her dream whispered, "I love you, Tara." She smiled in her sleep, thinking she had imagined it. The next 2 weeks were a strange, happy dream. True to his word, Ves let her want for nothing. He was an attentive, if slightly intimidating nurse, ensuring she ate, rested, and didn't put weight on her ankle. When the time came for her to leave, she found herself reluctant to go. The silence of her own small apartment felt lonely in a way it never had before. The car he had loaned her was a total loss. Before she could even begin to worry about it, Ves had another car delivered to her building. A brand new sedan, sleek and black, with 0 miles on the odometer. And once again, it hummed with magic, stronger than the last. "It's another loaner," he'd said, cutting off her protests. "From my company fleet. You need a safer car. We'll sort out the rest later." In the days after the crash, his phone had filled with red banners and blinking deadlines. A mineral rights summit in another realm, 3 chairmen cooling their heels in a glass-walled conference room, a contract so large the board had started using the word epical. Ves let calls die in his pocket. He pushed signature meetings to a week, then the next. Executives paced. Board members cleared their throats. He stayed. He fed her broth, argued with the doctor, and fixed her tea, just the way she liked it. Only when Tara insisted on returning to her work, ankle-braced, color back in her cheeks, did he relent and leave, breathing smoke as he flew towards the sunset. Gone for a week, he was due back that evening. They had a dinner planned, a real date, at a restaurant this time. Tara hummed to herself as she erased the day's notes from her classroom whiteboard, a genuine, unburdened happiness bubbling inside her. The classroom door creaked open. Kimber slipped in, her mouth tight, worry shining clear. Behind her, Coach Fangor hovered for a beat, lifted a hand in silent salute, and retreated. From the hall, Lank's cracked spectacles flashed as he pretended not to loiter. Even Buffer had been softer with Tara this week. Tea appearing, detentions reassigned, an uncharacteristically fierce glare for anyone who spoke too loudly near the west corridor. They cared, all of them. It wrapped around Tara like an unexpected blanket.
"Tara, hun, got a minute?"
Kimber asked, glancing down the empty hall.
Of course. What's up?
Kimber wrung her hands.
"Look, I don't believe it for a second, but you need to know what I heard just now."
Tara laughed.
What? Did one of your sources finally confess that they are the ones that pranked Coach Clobber with that fake troll bellow?
Kimber looked at her sadly and shook her head.
"I wish that were it, sugar."
She took a deep breath.
"There's a rumor going around that you've been making advances on Gar Stonebrook, that you're trying to break up his marriage."
The chalk fell from Tara's hand, shattering on the floor.
What?
"I know it's ridiculous,"
Kimber said quickly.
"but it's spreading. I wanted you to hear it from me."
The happy bubble inside Tara burst, replaced by a cold, sickening dread. The other shoe dropped that afternoon. She was packing her bag as the last of her students filed out for the day when a sharp, imperious voice cut through the air.
Leaving so soon? I'd have thought you'd be staying late to plot your next move.
Tara turned. Faye Stonebrook stood in the doorway, arms crossed, contempt carved into every elegant line. A few lingering students froze in the hall, eyes gone wide.
Faye, this isn't the time or the place,
Tara said, her voice strangled whisper.
Oh, it's perfect.
Faye sneered, stepping inside.
Right in your little kingdom. Let's be clear, charity case. Gar is my mate. Fate bonded or not, that doesn't give you license to circle him. You're done tutoring Lars, and from now on, you stay away from my family.
Her gaze sharpened, making the subtext plain.
And our business associates.
The threat was clear. Stay away from Ves. Humiliation, hot and sharp, washed over Tara. To be threatened like this, in front of students, was a violation. She took a steadying breath, clinging to her dignity and refusing to stoop to Faye's level.
If you'll excuse me, I'm leaving.
She walked past Faye, refusing to meet her venomous gaze, and fled down the hall, the burning prickle of eyes following her every step.
Running and hiding seems to be your new specialty.
Tara flinched. Gar Stonebrook emerged from the shadows of an alcove, blocking her path. Impeccably dressed, his smile was a predator's slash.
Mr. Stonebrook, don't think you want to be seen with me,
she said, anger steaming kettle in her chest.
Given that I'm after you and all.
That was to throw Faye off. She can be difficult. If you had only played nice, we wouldn't be in this situation.
He stepped closer, the air thickening with arrogance.
End this foolishness with Ves. You're embarrassing yourself.
A surge of fear broke through her anger.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
He laughed, low and condescending.
Don't you? You're a teacher, a charity case. He's a dragon. Do you have any concept of what that means?
He leaned in, his voice a venomous whisper.
He will live for millennia. He will watch mountains turn to dust. You are a human, a fragile, fleeting breath. You will grow old, you will wither, and you will die long before he even registers your absence. You think you can be with him? You are nothing but a temporary amusement.
The words punched her in the gut. Tara paled, the world tilting. Of all her fears, being a burden, being a scandal, being hurt, she had never once considered the brutal truth of their natures. Mortality, her own fleeting existence against his eternity.
Get away from me,
She choked, fury edging her voice.
You are a pathetic, cruel creature, and I want nothing to do with you or your family.
She felt a pang of guilt about Lars. But what could she do? His smile vanished. Rage twisted his features.
You ungrateful little...
His breath hitched, the mask slipping.
I should have finished you that day while you were driving to see him.
The words slammed into her. The accident. The shadow on the road. It was him. It was him. Terror lit her veins. Somehow she shoved past him, her ankle screaming, and fled. She didn't stop until she was in the driver's seat, hands shaking on the wheel. On the drive home, she thought of Ves, not as her protector, not as her heart, not as her love. She saw instead an eternal being, a mountain who would outlive her by thousands of years. Gar's words echoed in her soul, tearing her open with a fresh, gaping wound. You will wither, and you will die. That night, she sat in her apartment, the new car keys a lead weight on the counter. She was deep in the middle of a mess of her own making. Not just the scandal, not just Faye's humiliation, but the truth Gar had flung like a blade. She would always be temporary to Ves. A momentary distraction, She couldn't let herself be a burden. She couldn't drag him into this ugliness. Her phone chimed. It was him. "I've just arrived," Ves's voice said, warm, full of anticipation. "I'll shower, change, and be at your place in under an hour. I can't wait to see you." Her heart broke.
Ves, we need to talk.
The silence on the other end was immediate, heavy. "What's wrong?" She closed her eyes, forcing the excuse out.
I can't do this right now. With my degree finishing, the final projects, it's too much. I can't have any distractions. I need to cool things down for a while, at least until I graduate.
It was true, but it was a flimsy shield for the real reason. He knew it. She sensed his confusion, his hurt, even through the phone. "Tara, if something is wrong, just tell me," he urged, his voice dropping, the dragon's possessiveness bleeding through. "I can fix it."
You can't fix this.
She said, her voice cracking.
It's just me. Please, Ves. I just need some space, please.
A long, tense silence stretched between them. She could almost feel the war raging within him, the dragon that wanted to tear down her door and demand the truth, and the man who had promised to respect her. Finally, the man won. "All right, Tara," he said, his voice strained, stripped of its earlier warmth. "If that's what you need, I'll honor your wishes." The line went dead. Tara slid to the floor. Wrapping her arms around her knees, she finally let the tears come. Chapter 24. The Whole Truth.
I need some space.
The words echoed in his mind, nonsensical and sharp. They didn't align with the woman who had relaxed in his arms, whose nervous excitement he had felt like a second heartbeat just hours ago. The logic was flawed, the excuse flimsy. This wasn't a strategic withdrawal. It was a panicked retreat. The dragon roared in his mind, a furious, possessive beast clawing against the cage of his control.
She is lying. She is in distress. Go to her.
His human side had given his word to honor her wishes. That didn't mean he would remain ignorant. Ves picked up his scryphone and dialed Leroy. His security chief answered on the first ring. "Change of plans," Ves growled, his voice tight. "I need you to find something out for me." Discreetly.
"Sir?"
"Something has happened to Tara Hayworth," Ves stated, the words tasting like ash. "In the last 12 hours, she's trying to push me away. I need to know why. Check her workplace, her building, any chatter. I want to know if anyone has approached her, threatened her, looked at her the wrong way. I want to know everything. And Leroy, have your forensic team go over the wreckage of her car again. Every millimeter. If Gar had caused the accident." Ves dismissed the thought before his dragon took hold of it, demanding death and destruction.
"Understood,"
Leroy replied.
"I'll have a preliminary report for you within the hour."
He paced the length of his balcony, the cityscape outside mocking him with its serene beauty. Less than 40 minutes later, his scryphone chimed with a secure file from Leroy. He opened it, his jaw tightening as he read. Subject: Tara Hayworth key findings. Campus rumors. Significant chatter detected among the student body and junior faculty. Rumor alleges Ms. Hayworth is pursuing a romantic relationship with benefactor Gar Stonebrook. Source of rumor appears to be a coordinated disinformation campaign. Public confrontation. Faye Stonebrook confronted Ms. Hayworth at approximately 16:45 in her classroom. Eyewitnesses report Faye Stonebrook shouting accusations at Ms. Hayworth to "stay away from my husband." Ms. Hayworth did not engage and left the scene, described by witnesses as humiliated. Subsequently, Gar Stonebrook was seen harassing Ms. Hayworth by her car. Before the witness could intervene, they overheard Mr. Stonebrook telling Ms. Hayworth that she was nothing but a fleeting amusement to Mr. Ves Virilage, that she would wither and die long before the dragon even registered her absence. Ms. Hayworth was observed to pale visibly at his words. Shortly thereafter, she drove off, looking distraught. Ves's hands curled into fists as the dragon inside him bared its teeth. Now he understood. Tara hadn't pulled away because of the scandal or the whispers. She had looked at him, at what he was, and drawn the only conclusion she could, that their love was doomed by nature itself, that he would go on, eternal, while she faded to dust. And in her fear, she had done the one thing guaranteed to shatter them both. She had walked away. A hollow memory rose unbidden. The centuries he had lived before her, empty days filled with wealth and strategy and power, all of it nothing but ash in his mouth. That life, stretching forward without her, was no life at all. It was a prison of time. Just as this cold realization settled in, his scryphone chimed again. A second priority-flagged message from Leroy. Subject:
Urgent. Forensic finding. Hayworth vehicle. Sir, the team found something. Embedded in the crumpled metal of the passenger side door at the primary point of impact was non-human biological material. A tuft of coarse dark fur sheared off by the force of the collision.
Ves's breath hitched.
We ran the DNA. It's a definitive match to the supernatural database. The fur belongs to Gar Stonebrook's shifted form.
A low growl rumbled in Ves's chest, a sound of pure, predatory satisfaction. This was it. This was physical, undeniable proof of Gar's treachery. He had warned him to stay away. This was the last nail for Gar's coffin. Ves forwarded the encrypted forensic file directly to the Covenant Judiciary's chief arbiter. He added a single line: "The evidence is now conclusive. I await your summons." With conclusive proof, the trial was merely a formality. The slow wheels of justice were about to accelerate into a final, crushing verdict. The dragon in him roared, not with fury this time, but with certainty. If the chasm between them was mortality itself, then there was only one conclusion to draw. His promise to Tara was void, broken by the lies of a dead man walking. There was only one choice left to make. Chapter 25. The Price of a Lifetime. The aftermath of the confrontation left Tara hollowed out. Gar's venomous words had done more damage than any physical attack ever could. They had planted a seed of impossible truth in her heart. She found herself at Kimber's apartment, staring at a mug of tea she wasn't drinking. Tara looked up at her friend, her eyes swimming with unshed tears.
He tried to kill me, Kimber.
She whispered, the words still tasting foreign.
And then he told me the one thing that could actually destroy us.
Kimber's face tightened with horror.
What did he say?
That being with Ves will never happen. At least not long term. He's a dragon, Kimber. He'll live forever. I'll wither. I'll die. And he'll keep going without me. He should be with someone who won't leave him. I love him that much to let him go.
Silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of truths too cruel to bear.
Let me ask you something,
Kimber said at last, her voice quiet but intent.
Forget him for a second. If you could, would you live forever?
Tara didn't even hesitate. The answer rose from her like a heartbeat.
Yes,
she breathed.
For him, I would.
Something flickered in Kimber's gaze, a spark of thought.
Davy, the warlock I used to date, once told me something. Guy was half drunk, so take it with salt.
She waved a slim hand in the air.
Anyway, he said dragons aren't bound by wishes. Their magic is about balance, need and cost. He claimed that if a dragon wanted something badly enough, the world would give it, but only if the dragon gave up the dearest thing it had in return.
Tara's heart leaped before she could crush it back down. She pictured Ves, his power, his pride, his wings cutting through the night sky.
He would never do that.
She whispered, her voice lifeless.
Flying is his life.
Later that night, her phone chimed. A single, unadorned message from Ves. My apartment, the rooftop. Please. Her heart hammered. She had to end this. She had to tell him goodbye, for his sake. The elevator doors opened onto the windswept roof. The city glittered below like a galaxy of earthbound stars. And in the center of the rooftop, he was waiting. Not in his human form. Coils of obsidian stretched across the stone, his immense body glowing faintly in the moonlight, his wings, vast and terrible, curved like sails catching the night wind. His eyes burned, 2 suns, fierce and eternal. For a heartbeat, Tara froze. He was magnificent, terrifying, the sum of every nightmare and every dream. A creature out of myth, but love burned brighter than fear. She stepped forward, hand trembling, and laid it against the scaled curve of his cheek. The warmth surprised her, like sun-baked stone, solid and alive.
You're beautiful,
she whispered, the words breaking out of her like floodwaters.
I love you, all of you, always.
Her words shattered the last of his restraint. No fear, no hesitation, only love. For 2 centuries his wings had been his most precious possession. They were freedom, power, his endless sky. But as she stood before him, small and fierce, whispering love with no shield between them, their worth shifted. An eternity of empty skies, or a lifetime looking into her eyes. There was no choice at all. He closed his eyes and called on the oldest magic, the magic of balance, of need and cost. In the old tongue, he spoke a vow not to the heavens, but to the fabric of the world itself. He offered his wings, his sky, his freedom, and in return, he asked for only one thing: time. A lifetime, hers, matched to his. The words rippled through the air, ancient and terrible. Then the world erupted. A thunderclap split the rooftop, though no storm lay overhead. White lightning bloomed from Ves, not striking down but exploding outward, searing them both in a flood of light. Tara gasped, but there was no pain, only a wild, surging energy that poured through her veins, filling every cell until she thought she might burn alive with life itself. It was like waking after a lifetime of sleep. The light receded. The rooftop returned. But nothing was the same. The city lights were diamonds, each sharp and brilliant. The air tasted of ozone and starlight and him. And Ves, he stood before her in human form, eyes still glowing faintly with power. She looked past him. His back was bare, the space where his wings had been, empty. Her heart lurched.
Ves,
she whispered, horror slicing through her. She reached toward that empty space with shaking fingers.
What have you done?
He stepped forward, cupping her face in his hands. His touch was warm, steady, grounding. His voice was soft, unshakable. They were only wings, Tara. They couldn't hold you. I would give up the sky 1,000 times to spend one lifetime on the ground with you. His thumb traced her cheek, where the energy still hummed beneath her skin. I didn't make you immortal. I wouldn't steal your choice. I just tied my life to yours. We will have a lifetime. Together. We will grow old together. Tears spilled hot and fast, but they weren't of sorrow. They were joy, incandescent and overwhelming. He hadn't only chosen her. He had remade his entire existence for her. She threw her arms around him, clinging tight, her tears soaking his shirt. The empty space where his wings had been was no void at all. It was a monument, proof that love could move mountains, proof that love could give up the sky. Epilogue. The ground and the sky. The trial was short, though not without drama. The arbiter's voice cut through the chamber like a gavel of stone. The evidence was irrefutable. Gar Stonebrook had deliberately caused the crash. But when they asked Tara to speak, to confirm her testimony, she looked not at Gar, but at Lars. The boy's face was pale and blotched from crying, his small fists clenched in helpless fury and grief. She couldn't do it.
I ask mercy,
she said, her voice shaking but clear.
Not for him, for his son. Don't send him to the bone gnaw pits. Banish him, strip him of title, of power, of pride. Yes, but don't leave Lars with that horror tied to his name.
The chamber rippled with murmurs. Gar's alpha refused to help him, shoulders squared in silent disgust, and so the verdict was delivered. Gar was cast out, sent to a barren realm where his name meant nothing. His pack turned their backs, his power gone, his legacy dust. Faye approached Tara afterward, tears streaking her immaculate face.
I'm sorry,
she stammered, voice raw.
For everything I said, everything I believed. I should have seen him for what he was. You were never the enemy.
She swallowed hard, and for the first time, Tara believed her. Faye changed after that, quieter, humbler. For Lars's sake, she learned to soften. Weeks later, autumn sunlight streamed through Tara's small apartment windows. The scent of rosemary and garlic filled the air as she pulled a bubbling casserole from the oven, setting it down on the counter with a triumphant grin. Behind her, Ves leaned in the doorway, sleeves rolled to his forearms, a towel slung casually over his shoulder. He looked out of place in her modest kitchen, too broad for the frame, too powerful for the low ceiling, yet entirely at home. You're smiling like you've conquered a kingdom, he teased. She swatted at him with the oven mitt.
Lasagna is harder than it looks.
He crossed the room in 2 strides, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind. His lips brushed her temple. I'll take your word for it. But if you ask me, I already have everything I could ever want. She leaned back into him, her heart swelling with quiet, steady joy. No court, no scandal, no storm could take this from her. They had fought for it, bled for it, and now, finally, it was theirs. Later, when the dishes were stacked and the wine glasses half empty, they sat together on the couch. No wings spread behind him now, no sky between them, just ground beneath their feet, warm lamplight, and each other.
Thank you so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed it, please take a moment to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. It really helps the channel. And if you know someone who loves paranormal romance with or without spice, share this audiobook with them so that romance audiobooks can continue to grow.